For centuries, humanity has stumbled upon enigmas that defy explanation, secrets that linger in the shadows, waiting for someone brave enough to uncover them. Some are buried beneath ancient ruins, while others lurk in the heart of forgotten oceans. Yet all share one common truth: they remain unsolved. What happened to the lost colony of Roanoke? What is the true nature of the Dyatlov Pass incident? And who or what is behind the Bermuda Triangle? In the next 3 hours, we'll journey into the most bizarre mysteries ever recorded in history. Mysteries that continue to haunt us, question everything we know, and beckon us into the unknown. So sit back, relax, and let's dive in. The year is 673 AD, and the city of Constantinople, an ancient metropolis at the crossroads of East and West, stands on the precipice of history. For centuries, it had been a symbol of power and prosperity, but in one fateful moment, it was nearly brought to its knees. The city was under siege by a relentless enemy, the Umayyad Caliphate, a force that sought to crush the Byzantine Empire once and for all. Yet, despite their overwhelming numbers and advanced military tactics, they were met with an unexpected weapon, something that defied all logic and explanation. It was a substance that could burn on water, a fire that would not be extinguished by water, but only intensified by it. The mysterious weapon that turned the tide of battle is known to history as Greek fire. But what was it, exactly? Greek fire was not simply a weapon. It was a terror. A force so powerful and so devastating that it is said to have left the enemy in a state of disbelief, unable to comprehend how it could be defeated. The weapon was used primarily in naval warfare, where it would be deployed from siphons mounted on ships, creating an inferno that could spread across the seas with a terrifying speed. But despite its impact on history, the precise nature of Greek fire has remained one of the greatest mysteries of ancient warfare. No recipe, no formula, no full account of its composition has ever been discovered. It was said to be known only to a small circle of Byzantine engineers who guarded its secret fiercely. As the centuries passed, the knowledge of how to make Greek fire was lost to time, leaving only fragmented clues and unreliable reports. Some scholars believe that Greek fire was a mixture of chemicals such as sulfur, naphtha, and quicklime. Others have speculated that it may have been an early form of petroleum, a flammable substance found beneath the Earth's surface. Some even wonder if it was a more complex concoction, perhaps something akin to modern napalm or a precursor to the incendiary bombs that would come centuries later. The truth is, we simply do not know. There are even more fringe theories. Some have suggested that Greek fire could have been something entirely otherworldly, a substance so advanced that its creators possessed knowledge far beyond their time. Could the weapon have been derived from ancient alchemical practices, passed down through secretive cults? Or, as some conspiracy theorists have posited, could it have been the result of forgotten technologies from ancient civilizations long lost to history? As for the Byzantine Empire, the secret of Greek fire became one of its most closely guarded military assets. The last known use of Greek fire was recorded in the 12th century, but by then, the knowledge of how to produce it had already vanished. In 1204, during the Fourth Crusade, Constantinople itself was sacked, and with it, any final hopes of uncovering the full mystery of Greek fire. In the centuries that followed, attempts to recreate the weapon have been met with failure. Some have even tried to reconstruct it based on the scraps of information in ancient texts, only to find that nothing works quite the same way. The chemical composition remains elusive, and the delivery systems, such as the siphons used to launch the fire, have been reconstructed but never quite replicated. The question lingers: was Greek fire truly a product of the ancient world's ingenuity, or was it something else entirely? Perhaps, as with so many other lost technologies, the truth will remain hidden, a relic of a bygone age that time has swallowed whole. Or perhaps there are still secrets buried in ancient texts, waiting for someone to unlock them. For now, the mystery of Greek fire endures, unresolved, yet undeniably captivating. It is a reminder that even in our quest to understand the past, there are forces that remain beyond our grasp, lingering just out of reach, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves once more. As we leave behind the flames of Greek fire, a force that remains tantalizingly out of reach, we venture now into the world of the Norse, an era of bold voyages and unknown horizons, where mystery itself was a companion to the explorers. Just as the Byzantine Empire's secrets were fiercely guarded, so too were the Vikings, whose legacy has often been overshadowed by the most perplexing of all their achievements, the Vinland settlements. What were they? Who lived there? And why does the story of their existence, centuries before Columbus, remain a mystery? In the rugged, windswept coasts of North America, beneath the icy northern seas, lies a story lost to the tides of time. In the early 11th century, the Viking explorers, led by Leif Erikson, are believed to have sailed west from Greenland into unknown territories. Their ships cut through the icy waters of the North Atlantic, steering toward a land they called Vinland, a place rich with resources and mysterious promise. But despite their voyages and the settlements they left behind, the question lingers. Why did the Vikings abandon these colonies? And why do so few traces of their presence remain? The discovery of the Vinland settlements came not through legends alone, but through hard evidence. The saga of Vinland is told in the Vinland sagas, ancient texts that describe Leif Erikson's explorations around the year 1000 AD. One of the key locations described is known as Lons o Meadows, a site in Newfoundland, Canada, where archaeologists have uncovered Viking tools, structures, and artifacts, definitive proof that the Vikings reached North America. The site is a UNESCO World Heritage Site today, yet its discovery only deepens the mystery surrounding these distant outposts. Why did such a powerful and far-reaching civilization, with a culture known for conquest and settlement, abandon their hold on a land that seemed so promising? Beyond Lons o Meadows, the questions grow. The sagas speak of a fertile land teeming with resources, grapes, timber, and wildlife. It is no surprise that the Vikings, known for their ability to exploit new territories, would have sought to settle there. Yet, as time passed, the Vinland colonies disappeared from the historical record, as though they had never been there at all. Some suggest that the colonies were simply overwhelmed by conflict with the indigenous peoples of the region. Others argue that the Vikings may have been thwarted by environmental factors, the harsh climate of the North Atlantic, the frigid winters, and the long isolation of their settlements. In the centuries that followed, the evidence of these Norse settlements gradually faded, leaving historians to wonder if the Viking voyages were just another myth of seafaring legend, or if they truly reached the lands described in the sagas. But what if the answer is far more complicated? Some have proposed that the Viking presence in North America was not as short-lived as historians once thought. There are even theories that suggest the Vikings may have returned to Vinland multiple times, building new settlements or trading outposts that we have yet to discover. Could it be that more traces of Viking life remain hidden beneath the earth, waiting to be uncovered by future explorers? The mystery doesn't end with the disappearance of these Viking settlements. The Vinland sagas themselves contain details that defy easy interpretation. One of the most intriguing passages describes a conflict between the Norse settlers and the indigenous people of the area, the Skraelings. The sagas suggest that this confrontation was violent, leading to the eventual abandonment of the settlements. But this only raises more questions. Was this conflict truly the cause of the Vikings' departure? Or was there something more, something yet to be uncovered, behind the sudden retreat of the Viking explorers. Moreover, the very name Vinland itself presents a puzzle. While it is commonly believed to refer to a land abundant with wild grapes, as the sagas suggest, other scholars have proposed alternative theories. Some believe that Vinland could refer to a much broader area than just Newfoundland. Could the Vikings have reached as far south as the northeastern United States, or even into the heart of the Appalachian region? The discrepancy between the descriptions in the sagas and the locations identified by modern archaeologists raises the possibility that the Vikings left behind a trail of settlements scattered across a much larger area than we know. As intriguing as these possibilities are, the question remains, why did the Vikings, who had the ships and the means to explore vast distances, never return in force to the lands they had found? Some have suggested that the answer lies in the shifting dynamics of Viking society itself. The Viking Age was coming to an end, with internal conflicts and changes in leadership in Greenland and Iceland. Could the resources and effort required to maintain colonies in such a distant land simply have become too much for the Vikings to bear? In recent years, there have been new attempts to revisit this ancient mystery, with new archaeological excavations and cutting-edge technologies shedding fresh light on the Viking presence in North America. In 2015, a team of scientists and historians uncovered what they believe could be another Viking settlement on Baffin Island, in the Canadian Arctic. And yet, despite these discoveries, we are still left with more questions than answers. If more Viking settlements lie beneath the surface, why have they remained hidden for so long? Could these settlements have been deliberately erased from history, their traces removed to protect secrets lost to time? Perhaps there is something even deeper at play, something beyond the realms of exploration and conquest. Could the Vikings have encountered something on the shores of Vinland that made them abandon their colonies? Was it the land itself, too harsh, too isolated? Or could there have been something more supernatural, something beyond understanding that caused the Vikings to turn away from their newfound land? For now, the story of the Viking Vinland settlements remains a compelling enigma. The fragments of their history, the sagas, and the artifacts left behind hint at a much larger story, one that continues to beckon the curious and the adventurous. As more discoveries are made and more theories emerge, the mystery of Vinland will continue to unfold. But for now, we are left with only the quiet whisper of the waves, as the memory of the Viking explorers lingers on, lost in time. What secrets still lie hidden beneath the soil of Vinland, and what might still be uncovered in the years to come? The answer, like the voyages themselves, remains a distant horizon just out of reach. As the winds of the North Atlantic gradually fade into the background, we now turn our gaze toward the heat of the vast Sahara Desert, where an even older mystery has been buried for centuries, a legend that stretches back to the very early days of Arabic exploration. It is a tale of a city lost to the sands, a place that may never have existed, yet still stirs the imagination. This is the enigma of Zerzura, the so-called City of Gold that has haunted explorers, historians, and treasure hunters for hundreds of years. Zerzura, as described in ancient Arabic texts, is a city hidden deep within the Sahara Desert, a place where the desert sands shift in such a way that the city remains elusive to those who seek it. It is said to be a land of unimaginable wealth and beauty, where treasures beyond comprehension lie waiting, untouched by time. The first accounts of Zerzura date back to as early as the 10th century, when the legendary traveler and geographer Al-Masudi wrote about a city of great wealth located in the heart of the desert. These early descriptions spoke of a city that was not only rich in gold, but also mysterious in its nature, an oasis of abundance in the midst of an arid, unforgiving landscape. In these early accounts, Zerzura is often depicted as a place where the laws of nature and time seem to bend, The desert surrounding it was described as being unusually fertile, with rivers running through it and lush vegetation growing in abundance. But it wasn't just the city's natural wealth that intrigued early explorers. It was also the strange rumors that surrounded it. Some accounts suggest that the city's inhabitants were blessed with unnatural longevity, living for hundreds of years, or even more. Others spoke of a race of mysterious beings who guarded the city's treasures, offering a dangerous challenge to any who dared to approach. Despite these tantalizing descriptions, the existence of Zerzura remains unproven. Countless expeditions have been launched over the centuries in search of the legendary city, but all have returned empty-handed, their reports filled with frustration and confusion. Some explorers claim to have found the remains of ancient ruins that could be linked to Zerzura, but definitive evidence has remained elusive, and the question persists: is Zerzura a real place, lost to the sands of time, or simply the product of overactive imaginations and the allure of treasure? The mystery of Zerzura is made all the more enigmatic by the sheer number of sources that reference it, and the inconsistencies that arise within those references. In the 13th century, the famed traveler Ibn Khaldun wrote about a great oasis in the southern Sahara that was believed to be the site of the city. Yet in his account, he spoke not of a city of gold, but of a city that had been long abandoned, with only ruins left to mark its passing. In other writings, Zerzura is described as a paradise, hidden in plain sight, with no indication of how or why it fell into ruin. Yet the most tantalizing aspect of the legend is the repeated mention of its location, deep in the Sahara, beyond the reach of ordinary maps and often lost in the shifting dunes. The descriptions vary from source to source, with some placing Zerzura to the south of Egypt, while others point to the area near the Libyan border. In all cases, the city's location is depicted as being difficult, if not impossible, to find, a place where the desert itself seems to guard its secrets. So, what are we to make of these accounts? Could Zerzura have been a real city, a thriving metropolis once situated in the heart of the Sahara, now lost to history? There are those who believe that Zerzura was a trading hub, perhaps part of an ancient network of cities that once connected the civilizations of Africa, the Middle East, and beyond. Some even argue that the city was built upon the remains of a much older civilization, perhaps a precursor to the great Egyptian or Phoenician empires. Others, however, suggest that Zerzura may have been something far stranger. Could it have been a mythic place, not built by human hands at all, but created through the collective imagination of desert wanderers? Some historians believe that the story of Zerzura is not one of a physical city, but a metaphor for the unattainable riches and beauty that the desert promised but never delivered. In this view, the City of Gold is less a literal place and more a symbol of human desire, a dream that always remains just out of reach. Then there are the more speculative theories, which venture into the realm of the supernatural. Some claim that Zerzura was once a city that held great knowledge, perhaps even a repository of lost ancient wisdom. Could the city have been built by a civilization far more advanced than we imagine, one that harnessed technology or esoteric knowledge that we cannot even begin to comprehend? And if so, could that knowledge have been deliberately hidden, buried under the weight of the shifting sands, in order to keep it from falling into the wrong hands? As recent expeditions into the Sahara have proven, the search for Zerzura is not for the faint of heart. The Sahara, with its vast, unrelenting expanse, is a treacherous place, and those who venture into its depths often face extreme conditions: sandstorms, scorching heat by day, and freezing temperatures by night. Yet the allure of Zerzura's hidden treasures continues to draw people to this remote part of the world. Even today, explorers, archaeologists, and adventurers continue to search for clues, hoping to unlock the secret of this lost city and its fabled wealth. But what if, after all these years, Zerzura is not a physical city at all, but a representation of something deeper? Could the idea of a lost city be a reflection of humanity's endless pursuit of the unknown, of the mysteries that exist beyond our reach? If Zerzura does exist, what does it tell us about the civilizations that once thrived in the heart of the desert, and the enduring power of stories to shape our world? The mystery of Zerzura, like so many others, remains unsolved. The legend continues to intrigue, drawing us into its web of tantalizing possibilities. Is the city still waiting to be discovered, its golden riches just beneath the surface? Or is it, perhaps, forever lost to the sands of time, a mirage that will forever elude our grasp? The answer, it seems, is buried beneath the shifting dunes, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. As the sun sets over the vast expanse of the Sahara, casting long shadows over the ancient desert, we shift our focus from the lost cities of the sands to another equally perplexing enigma, the sudden disappearance of the Maya cities. In the dense jungles of Central America, the remnants of a once great civilization lie hidden beneath thick layers of vegetation. Towering pyramids and intricately carved stone temples rise from the earth, remnants of a culture that flourished for centuries. Yet, despite the grandeur of their achievements, something caused the Maya cities to slowly collapse and disappear, leaving behind a mystery that has echoed through the ages. The Maya civilization, which spanned much of present-day Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and Honduras, was one of the most advanced and sophisticated cultures of the ancient world. At its peak, around the 8th century AD, it boasted impressive cities like Tikal, Copan, and Palenque, places of immense cultural, political, and religious significance. The Maya created complex systems of writing, built vast urban centers, and developed advanced knowledge in astronomy, mathematics, and agriculture. Their civilization seemed poised to endure, but by the 9th century AD, the once thriving cities of the Maya region were largely abandoned, their grand structures falling silent. What happened? The collapse of the Maya cities is one of the most enduring mysteries in history, and it has sparked intense debate among archaeologists, historians, and scientists for generations. Numerous theories have been proposed, but none have fully explained the complex and gradual decline of this remarkable civilization. In the ancient city of Tikal, one of the largest and most powerful centers of the Maya civilization, monumental pyramids rise above the treetops, their surfaces still covered with weathered inscriptions. These buildings once served as centers of politics, religion, and trade. Yet by the end of the 9th century, the city was abandoned, its people disappearing as quickly as they had once arrived. Tikal wasn't alone. The same fate befell numerous other cities across the region. This phenomenon wasn't an instantaneous event, but rather a slow, creeping process that took place over several generations. The Maya didn't just vanish overnight. Cities like Tikal saw a gradual abandonment, with populations slowly declining, religious rituals fading, and trade networks dissolving. But what caused this gradual disintegration? The mainstream theory for the collapse of the Maya cities has centered on environmental factors. The Maya were heavily reliant on agriculture, and it's believed that deforestation and soil depletion, caused by over-farming and the clearing of vast areas of jungle for construction and agriculture, led to a catastrophic breakdown of the region's delicate ecosystem. As the soil eroded and the climate shifted, crop yields decreased, leading to famine and social unrest. With food supplies dwindling, the once strong political and religious systems that held the cities together began to weaken. Some researchers point to evidence of severe droughts in the region, which may have compounded the environmental stresses. Droughts would have disrupted the Maya's water supply, further weakening their agricultural systems and making it even more difficult to sustain large populations. This, in turn, may have caused internal conflict and the fracturing of city-states, with some regions retreating into the jungle while others faded into obscurity. However, this explanation, while compelling, doesn't tell the full story. The collapse of the Maya cities was not uniform. Some cities, such as those in the southern lowlands, seem to have been hit hardest, while others, like the northern city of Chichen Itza, managed to survive for centuries longer. The idea that a single environmental factor could explain such a complex and uneven decline seems increasingly inadequate. As researchers continue to study the Maya collapse, new, more speculative theories have emerged. Could there have been social and political causes that contributed to the city's downfall? It's been suggested that internal strife, rivalries between powerful city-states, competition for resources, and the increasing strain on political leadership could have played a significant role. The Maya were a fragmented civilization, composed of many independent city-states that often waged war against each other. These internal conflicts could have further destabilized the region, making it more vulnerable to collapse. Some even wonder if the Maya elites, who were deeply invested in religious rituals and astronomical observations, began to lose faith in their traditional systems. Could the sudden collapse of their cities have been driven by a spiritual crisis, as the people of the Maya cities began to question their rulers, their gods, and their place in the world? As the great temples fell silent and the grand ceremonies ceased, could it be that the people simply stopped believing in the systems that had once governed their lives? And then there are the fringe theories, the more fantastical explanations that touch on the unknown. Some have speculated that the Maya collapse could have been the result of an outside force, a foreign invader, perhaps even an extraterrestrial influence. These ideas, though lacking hard evidence, reflect the deep mystery surrounding the Maya civilization. Could there have been forces beyond human comprehension? Forces that we still do not understand, that contributed to their downfall? Others point to the possibility of disease, either brought by external contacts or arising locally. Ancient epidemics have been a recurrent theme in many of history's collapses, and some suggest that a plague could have devastated the Maya cities, further reducing their ability to recover. The question that remains is this: why did the collapse occur in such a particular and uneven way? What was it about certain cities that allowed them to survive longer, while others were quickly abandoned? Was there something in the geography, the political systems, or the very fabric of Maya society that led to this uneven collapse? It's also worth considering the possibility that the Maya didn't truly disappear. Some historians suggest that, rather than vanishing entirely, the Maya simply adapted and dispersed. While the grand cities of the southern lowlands were abandoned, other centers, like Chichen Itza, continued to thrive. Could the collapse have been a form of transformation, where the Maya people moved, adapted, and rebuilt in different ways, rather than disappearing altogether? In the end, the mystery of the Maya city's collapse endures, drawing us into a world of lost grandeur and unanswered questions. With each new discovery, whether through excavation, advanced technology, or new theories, we inch closer to understanding what happened to one of the world's most fascinating civilizations. But for now, the ruins remain, silent and enigmatic, offering no easy answers. Only the whispers of a once great culture, and the unanswered question of why it faded into history. As we stand among these ancient stones, the story of the Maya, both their rise and their fall, remains a profound mystery, waiting for the right moment to reveal its secrets. As we leave behind the forgotten cities of the Maya and the secrets of their collapse, we now turn our gaze to a different kind of mystery, one that takes us to the heart of an ancient, vibrant civilization, a place where knowledge flourished and ideas were exchanged. The city of Baghdad, in the 9th and 10th centuries, was the beating heart of the Islamic Golden Age. At the center of this intellectual renaissance stood the House of Wisdom, a legendary institution where scholars from around the world gathered to translate, study, and build upon the greatest knowledge of their time. It was a place of unimaginable intellectual wealth. Yet, today, much of that knowledge has vanished, lost to the ravages of time, war, and destruction. What happened to the priceless manuscripts, the groundbreaking discoveries, and the revolutionary ideas that once flowed from this institution? The House of Wisdom, founded by the Abbasid caliphs in the early 9th century, was more than just a library or a center of learning. It was a beacon of intellectual curiosity, a place where scholars of all backgrounds, Arabs, Persians, Greeks, Jews, and others, came together to preserve and expand upon the knowledge of the ancient world. The House of Wisdom housed the works of Aristotle, Plato, and Hippocrates, as well as the writings of Indian, Persian, and Chinese scholars. It became a hub for the translation of ancient texts into Arabic, laying the groundwork for the intellectual and scientific advancements that would later fuel the European Renaissance. Within the walls of this remarkable institution, scholars made groundbreaking strides in mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy. Al-Khwarizmi, often called the father of algebra, worked here, developing the foundations of modern algebra. Ibn al-Haytham, the pioneering scientist and mathematician, contributed significantly to the study of optics and the understanding of light. The House of Wisdom was not merely a repository of ancient texts, but a vibrant intellectual workshop where new ideas were nurtured, debated, and tested. Yet despite its monumental significance, much of the knowledge housed within the House of Wisdom is now lost. The institution itself was destroyed during the Mongol invasion of Baghdad in 1258, a devastating event that marked the end of the Islamic Golden Age. The city, once a center of intellectual activity, was sacked and burned. The library, filled with priceless manuscripts and scientific texts, was either destroyed or lost in the chaos. Many of the scholars who had worked there were killed, and the city fell into a period of decline from which it would never fully recover. The loss of the House of Wisdom represents one of the greatest intellectual catastrophes in history. Thousands of years of accumulated knowledge, from the ancient Greeks to the Islamic scholars of the Middle Ages, were lost in a single moment. Some of the most important works in history, texts that could have illuminated our understanding of the universe, vanished without a trace. What happened to these manuscripts? Were they destroyed in the flames, or did some survive, hidden away, perhaps waiting to be rediscovered? For centuries, scholars have speculated about the fate of the House of Wisdom's lost knowledge. Some believe that the manuscripts were burned in the fires set by the Mongol invaders, while others argue that they were carried away by surviving scholars, hidden from the flames. Could some of the knowledge preserved in the House of Wisdom have been moved to other parts of the Islamic world, or even into Europe, before the Mongols arrived? The answer remains unclear, but the idea that these ancient texts might have survived in secret, waiting for future generations to rediscover them, is tantalizing. There are also more speculative theories. Some believe that the House of Wisdom's knowledge was deliberately hidden by the ruling elite, either to protect it from destruction or to control its power. Could certain manuscripts have been deliberately concealed to preserve them for future scholars? Or might some of the texts have been hidden to prevent their potentially dangerous ideas from spreading? While there is little evidence to support these ideas, the notion that valuable knowledge might have been deliberately shielded from destruction is a provocative one. The loss of the House of Wisdom also raises another intriguing question. What if some of the knowledge lost there could have shaped the course of history differently? The works of the scholars who studied at the House of Wisdom were crucial in transmitting ancient knowledge to Europe. The intellectual treasures of the House of Wisdom were among the key influences on the European Renaissance, which began in the 14th century. Yet, as the Mongols destroyed the city, it's possible that vital pieces of that intellectual puzzle were erased. What ideas, theories, and discoveries might we have gained from the knowledge that vanished in those flames? There are hints that some of this lost knowledge may have found its way into the West. During the 12th century, many of the works translated at the House of Wisdom were later transmitted to Europe, often through Spain and Sicily, where scholars encountered the Arabic translations of Greek and Roman texts. These translations laid the foundation for a new wave of intellectual discovery in Europe. However, we may never know if the House of Wisdom held other, even more revolutionary ideas that never reached the West. Despite the destruction wrought by the Mongols, there have been attempts to recover some of the knowledge that once resided within the House of Wisdom. Scholars continue to search for ancient texts that may have been preserved in remote libraries, private collections, or hidden archives. Some of the works that once adorned the shelves of the House of Wisdom may still be waiting to be rediscovered, perhaps in a forgotten library or lost manuscript. Could the key to unlocking this lost knowledge still lie buried in an old library or hidden archive somewhere in the world? The mystery surrounding the lost knowledge of the House of Wisdom remains unsolved. While we can piece together fragments of its intellectual legacy through the works that survived, we will never fully understand the scope of the knowledge that was lost in that catastrophic moment. What if there were mathematical equations, medical discoveries, or philosophical treatises that could have reshaped the course of human history? Had they not been lost to the flames? What insights into the natural world, or the human condition, might we have gained from these texts? The House of Wisdom represents a tragic chapter in the history of human knowledge, a reminder that intellectual and cultural achievements, no matter how grand, are fragile, vulnerable to the tides of time and the forces of destruction. As we continue to search for lost texts and uncover forgotten ideas, we can only wonder, what else lies hidden, waiting to be rediscovered? In the end, the legacy of the House of Wisdom remains both an intellectual treasure and an enduring mystery, a symbol of what was lost, but also of what may still lie beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. As we leave behind the intellectual riches of the House of Wisdom and the vanished knowledge of the ancient world, we shift our attention to another enigma that has captured the imaginations of historians and explorers for centuries. A legend that reached across continents and spanned cultures, its mystery tied to the search for a ruler who was both a king and a saint. This is the story of Prester John, a figure who, for centuries, was thought to rule a mighty Christian kingdom hidden somewhere in the distant east. But who was Prester John, and where was his kingdom? The answers, it seems, remain just beyond our reach. The tale of Prester John begins in the 12th century, when rumors of his kingdom began to spread through Europe, carried by travelers, merchants, and adventurers. According to the stories, Prester John was a powerful and benevolent Christian monarch, a king who ruled over a vast, wealthy kingdom full of marvels and mysteries. His subjects were said to be devout Christians, living in a land of peace and prosperity. But what made Prester John's kingdom so intriguing was its location. No one could seem to agree on where it was, but it was always said to be far away, beyond the known world, nestled somewhere in the distant reaches of Asia or Africa. Descriptions of Prester John's kingdom varied wildly. Some accounts placed it in the heart of Asia, deep within the lands of the Mongols or the distant territories of India. Others suggested that it was somewhere in Africa, possibly in the Ethiopian highlands, or even further south, beyond the reaches of the known world. What was consistent in all these stories, however, was the belief that Prester John was a powerful ruler, a monarch who possessed great wealth and influence, a Christian king in a region that had long been dominated by non-Christian powers. One of the most widely circulated accounts of Prester John came from the 12th century, when a letter was supposedly sent from the king himself to the Byzantine emperor Manuel I Comnenus. The letter described a Christian kingdom full of treasures, exotic animals, and marvels beyond imagination. The letter spoke of a kingdom so rich that its king had vast armies and a wealth of gold and jewels. The kingdom was said to be governed by a Christian monarch, a man of great piety and virtue who held sway over his people with both compassion and strength. The legend quickly spread through Europe, fueled by the Crusades and the intense interest in the far reaches of the world. As the Crusaders pushed deeper into the Holy Land, they became obsessed with the idea of finding Prester John and his kingdom, hoping that an alliance with this powerful Christian ruler might help turn the tide in their struggle against the Muslims. The search for Prester John became an obsession for many, with expeditions launched into Asia, Africa, and even the Middle East in search of his realm. Yet, despite the fervent search, no one could ever find the elusive kingdom or the ruler behind the legend. But why did the legend of Prester John persist for so long, despite the lack of any solid evidence? Some historians suggest that the figure of Prester John was a kind of mirror to the growing desire for a Christian counterbalance to the Islamic empires of the time. The Crusaders, facing the vast expanse of Muslim-controlled territories, sought a powerful Christian ally who could help them in their struggle. In this context, Prester John became a symbol of hope, a figure who represented the possibility of a united Christian world, standing strong against the forces of Islam. Yet, as time passed, the idea of Prester John began to take on a more fantastical quality. Accounts of his kingdom became increasingly elaborate, filled with strange wonders and miracles. Some described Prester John's court as a place of great beauty, where gold flowed like water and where exotic animals roamed freely. Others spoke of the king's mystical powers, his ability to heal the sick, perform miracles, and command the forces of nature. The more these stories spread, the more distant and unreachable the kingdom of Prester John became, transforming from a potentially real place into a mythic, almost otherworldly realm. As the centuries went on, the search for Prester John shifted from an obsession with a living ruler to a quest for a hidden, lost kingdom, perhaps an empire that had once thrived but had since faded from history. But where was this kingdom? The mystery deepened as different explorers proposed competing theories. Some suggested that Prester John's kingdom could have been located in the Ethiopian highlands, where the Christian kingdom of Aksum had once been a powerful force in the region. The idea of a Christian kingdom in Africa seemed plausible, given the strong Christian presence in Ethiopia, and some even believed that the Ethiopian emperor was the true Prester John. Others looked to the Far East. The Mongol Empire, which was rapidly expanding in the 13th century, was seen as a possible location for Prester John's kingdom. The Mongols were known for their conquests, but they also had a reputation for religious tolerance, making the idea of a Christian kingdom within their empire seem plausible. A number of accounts from the period spoke of a Christian king of the East, which some scholars believed referred to Prester John, though no definitive evidence was ever found. One of the most intriguing theories was that Prester John was not a single figure, but a title used by multiple rulers across different regions. This theory suggested that the title Prester John was a term used to describe a series of Christian kings, all of whom were part of the larger legend that had been passed down through generations. In this interpretation, the mystery of Prester John might not be about one king, but about a larger tradition of rulers who, over time, came to embody the ideals of Christian kingship, as imagined by European explorers. Yet despite these theories, the mystery of Prester John remains unresolved. The legend of the Christian king in the East has continued to inspire exploration and research, but it has also led to a host of speculations, some more plausible than others. Did Prester John exist as a real king, or was he merely a symbol created by the imagination of medieval Europe? If he did exist, where was his kingdom, and what happened to it? In the end, the search for Prester John reveals more about the desires and dreams of the people who sought him than it does about the mysterious figure himself. Was he a real king? A ruler with vast riches and power? Or was he an invention, an idealized figure born from the yearning for a Christian utopia in a world torn by religious conflict? As we continue to delve into the mysteries of history, the question of Prester John remains unresolved, a tantalizing riddle that draws us into the distant past. Was his kingdom real? Or was it nothing more than a myth? For now, the mystery endures, and the search for the elusive king continues to spark the imagination of all who dare to seek answers. High in the rugged Ethiopian highlands lies a marvel of human ingenuity, an ancient complex of churches, unlike any other in the world. These are the rock-hewn churches of Lalibela, carved entirely from solid stone, as if they grew from the very earth itself. Nestled in the mountains, surrounded by breathtaking landscapes, these 12 churches have long been a place of pilgrimage, drawing visitors with their sheer scale and spiritual significance. Yet beyond their beauty and importance lies a question that has intrigued historians and archaeologists for centuries. How were these monumental structures built? Lalibela is often referred to as the New Jerusalem, a sacred site meant to replicate the holy city of Jerusalem for Ethiopian Christians. According to legend, King Lalibela, who reigned during the 12th and 13th centuries, commissioned the construction of these churches as part of his divine mission. Seeking to create a place of worship that would rival the great holy cities of the world, he envisioned a sacred realm carved from the land itself. But what remains as the most astonishing part of this vision is the construction itself. These churches were not built in the traditional manner, using stone blocks or bricks. Instead, they were sculpted from single blocks of rock, chiseled directly into the earth. The construction of Lalibela's churches is nothing short of a mystery. Each church was painstakingly carved, and the process is thought to have taken decades, perhaps even centuries. The most well-known of these is Bete Georgis, the Church of St. George. Its cross-shaped design is flawless, its details so precise that it seems almost as though the stone had been poured into place, not carved from it. Surrounded by a trench that descends deep into the ground, it appears to rise organically from the rock. How could the ancient builders, with only basic tools, have accomplished such a feat? The sheer complexity of the architecture and the scale of the carving suggest an understanding of construction that seems far ahead of its time. Mainstream accounts often point to King Lalibela himself as the mastermind behind this monumental project, aided by a vast workforce of artisans and laborers. Yet, the method of construction, particularly the intricacy of the carvings, poses many questions. How did these workers, using simple tools like hammers, chisels, and picks, carve such finely detailed interiors and exteriors? The precision of the stonework, the sharp angles, and the intricate design all seem to defy the limited technology available in the medieval period. Some believe the process was relatively straightforward, with workers carving away at the rock over time, but others suggest that the builders possessed some form of knowledge or technique that has been lost to history. The very existence of underground tunnels connecting the churches hints at a level of planning that goes beyond what we might expect from a group of artisans in the 12th century. Were these tunnels designed purely for practical reasons, or did they have deeper symbolic meaning? Could the layout of the churches themselves have been designed with an understanding of astronomy or sacred geometry, tying them to celestial alignments or the movement of the stars? It's also been suggested that the builders may have employed methods we don't fully understand, perhaps even lost technologies. Some speculative theories propose that the use of sound waves or vibrations could have played a role in shaping the rock, though there is no concrete evidence to support this. What is clear, however, is that the work required extraordinary skill and effort. given the size of the project and the time it would have taken, it seems almost impossible to imagine how a single group, working with only rudimentary tools, could have carved these churches without some form of advanced knowledge or help. Local legends add another layer of intrigue to the story. Some claim that the churches were not built by human hands at all, but with divine assistance. In one popular version of the tale, angels are said to have descended from heaven, helping the workers complete the churches overnight. While this is certainly a mythic explanation, it reflects the deep reverence with which the Lalibela churches are regarded by those who see them as a sacred, almost miraculous creation. Could the remarkable craftsmanship be the result of divine intervention, or is there a more grounded, yet still mysterious, explanation? Beyond the technicalities of construction, there's also the question of why Lalibela's churches were built in the first place. Was it simply to provide a center for Christian worship, or was there a deeper symbolic purpose behind the project? The churches are arranged in a way that seems to mirror the spiritual landscape of the time. Some believe that their positions, the arrangement of the entrances, and the use of natural light all have symbolic significance. Could the construction of these churches have been tied to an ancient religious or spiritual system that we no longer fully understand? If the design of Lalibela was influenced by a hidden belief system, could this knowledge have been passed down through generations, perhaps even reaching the builders of Lalibela? There are also theories that suggest the church complex was not just a religious center, but a statement of power. Perhaps King Lalibela saw the creation of these churches as a way to assert his authority, not just over the land, but over the spiritual realm as well. After all, the act of carving such grand structures directly into the earth would have been seen as a gesture of tremendous ambition, a king claiming dominion not only over his people, but over the very land he ruled. In a sense, the churches were a testament to his power and a demonstration of his close connection with the divine. As we consider these questions, it becomes clear that the mystery of Lalibela is far from solved. Scholars continue to debate how these churches were built, and the theories about their origins and purpose remain as diverse and varied as the carvings themselves. Could there have been lost technologies or forgotten techniques that enabled the creation of these magnificent structures? Or was the construction a feat of sheer human will and determination, driven by a king's vision and the devotion of his people? Perhaps the most intriguing aspect of the Lalibela churches is that they continue to inspire wonder and awe, not just because of their beauty, but because of the mystery that still surrounds them. What secrets lie buried beneath the rock? What knowledge was passed down through the generations that enabled such an achievement? As we stand before these timeless monuments, we are left to ponder. What if there's more to the story of Lalibela than we have yet discovered? What other mysteries of the ancient world remain hidden, waiting for us to uncover them? For now, the churches of Lalibela remain silent, their true story still waiting to be told. The sun sets on the vast, arid coast of Egypt, where the Mediterranean Sea meets the land with a soft murmur, as though whispering secrets from a time long past. In the distance, the ancient city of Alexandria once stood, a center of learning, of culture, and of knowledge that has captivated the imagination of historians, archaeologists, and mystery enthusiasts for centuries. Its greatest legacy, however, is not the monumental stones that remain or the sweeping beauty of the coast, but the echoes of its vanished heart, the Library of Alexandria. The library was not merely a collection of scrolls, but a beacon of intellectual brilliance, housing hundreds of thousands of texts that spanned the breadth of human understanding in the ancient world. It was a place where the brightest minds gathered to unravel the mysteries of the universe, a place where the ideas of the greatest philosophers, mathematicians, and scientists mingled under the watchful eye of Ptolemaic rulers. But for all its grandeur, It was a library built on the precipice of catastrophe. We have long known of the library's destruction. Historians and scholars have traced its demise to several pivotal moments: the Roman conquest of Alexandria in 48 BC, the fire that ravaged the city in the 3rd century AD, and the eventual decline of the library through the centuries. Yet, despite these recorded events, there is still no definitive answer to one of history's most pressing questions. Where are the final remnants of the Library of Alexandria? In this silent, forgotten space between recorded history and conjecture, we find the lingering mystery. Historians agree that the destruction of the library was neither sudden nor singular. The first blow may have come when Julius Caesar's forces set fire to the city in 48 BC during the siege of Alexandria. While the fire burned parts of the city's port district, including the warehouses where scrolls were stored, some scholars argue that this event may have been more catastrophic to the library than previously thought. Others suggest that the library's main collection may have already been moved to safety before the flames spread, leaving only a small portion behind. Yet the mystery does not end there. In the centuries following Caesar's conquest, as Alexandria became a hub for Christian thought, the library continued to dwindle, its treasures lost to time and neglect. In the 3rd century AD, under Emperor Aurelian, further destruction occurred as he waged war against Queen Zenobia of Palmyra, and during his campaigns, more buildings were destroyed in Alexandria, including what was left of the library. Perhaps the final blow was delivered in the 4th century, under Emperor Theodosius I, whose zeal for Christian orthodoxy led to the suppression of pagan institutions. Some suggest that by this time, the library had already faded into obscurity, yet the possibility that it may have still existed in some form during this period remains a tantalizing thought. Did the library's last surviving scrolls meet their fate during Theodosius's destruction of pagan temples? Or was the library's destruction a slow, unceremonious process spread over decades and centuries with no singular event marking its end? There is, of course, the legend of the final blow, the burning of the Serapeum, an ancient temple dedicated to the god Serapis in 391 AD. This was not just any temple. It was the site of the library's supposed daughter library, a repository for the knowledge that had survived the earlier fires. In the fire that consumed the Serapeum, many believed that the last scrolls of Alexandria's library were lost forever. Was it truly the end? Or did some remnants of this ancient intellectual treasure escape the flames, hidden in places still unknown? Yet, as with so many great historical enigmas, the answers seem to slip just beyond our grasp. The written records we do have on the library's destruction come from sources that were either written after the fact or are so scant in detail that they leave us with more questions than answers. The burning of the library is a symbol of the fragility of knowledge itself, how even the greatest achievements can be lost to time, forgotten in the face of political upheaval and cultural change. But what if something of the library remains? Perhaps not in the form of dusty scrolls or crumbling papyri, but in lost manuscripts, hidden away in the archives of ancient scholars who fled Alexandria in its final years. There are theories suggesting that fragments of the library's knowledge may have traveled across the Mediterranean, reaching other great centers of learning like Rome, Byzantium, and even far-off Persia. The works of Aristotle, Euclid, and Archimedes were preserved after all, but were they preserved in their entirety? Or did parts of their work, lost to history, wait in the shadows for centuries to be rediscovered? Speculation about the fate of these texts takes us into the realm of the mysterious and the unknown. Did some of the ancient scrolls find their way into the hands of scholars in distant lands, who carefully concealed them from the eyes of the powers that sought to destroy them? Some modern researchers argue that secret libraries may have existed in locations as far away as Tibet or the monasteries of the early Christian world, where such knowledge would have been hidden for safekeeping. In the late 19th century, a curious discovery in the ancient city of Herculaneum in Italy reignited the hopes of historians. There, in the ruins of a villa buried by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, archaeologists uncovered a set of carbonized scrolls. Though they had been reduced to a state where they could no longer be read in their original form, scholars believed they were linked to the lost works of the great philosophers of Alexandria. Could this be the long-awaited clue? Could the Herculaneum scrolls represent one of the last surviving remnants of the Library of Alexandria, smuggled away from Egypt long before the city's final fall? As time passes, the allure of the lost library only grows stronger. Some suggest that the true fate of the Library of Alexandria might be hidden in plain sight, concealed within the vaults of museums or tucked away in private collections. Might there be ancient scrolls, buried beneath centuries of dust, that still contain the knowledge of the ancients? Or perhaps, as some have speculated, the library's final remnants were buried beneath the waves, lost to the depths of the Mediterranean during a storm, or through some other untold tragedy. Yet, the deeper we delve into this mystery, the more we realize how little we actually know. The real question is not simply what was lost, but who lost it, and why. Did those who held the knowledge of the library recognize its significance, or was it, over time, reduced to a symbol of a bygone era, forgotten and discarded? And if some of that knowledge still survives, why have we not found it? As we look back through the haze of history, the final fate of the Library of Alexandria remains elusive. Were all its treasures lost in the flames, or did some of its secrets endure, hidden in the corners of the world, waiting to be rediscovered? Perhaps the most profound mystery of all is the thought that some things, in their time, are simply too vast, too precious to be known by any one generation. The air inside a darkened room is thick with the scent of old parchment. There, resting on a table under soft lighting, is one of the most enigmatic and perplexing manuscripts ever discovered, the Voynich manuscript. Its pages, filled with vibrant drawings of plants, stars, human figures, and curious, unreadable script, have confounded scholars and cryptographers for centuries. Despite exhaustive efforts, no one has managed to decipher its text, nor has anyone definitively identified the origins of its creator. The manuscript, with its baffling contents, raises one critical question that continues to haunt researchers. Who wrote it, and why? The manuscript itself is no ordinary book. It measures just under 9 inches tall and 6 inches wide. Its dimensions unremarkable, its contents anything but. The thick vellum pages are adorned with strange symbols, forming an alphabet that has never been conclusively linked to any known language. Drawings of plants appear throughout, but these plants are unlike anything seen in nature, their features often incomprehensible, their forms a puzzling blend of familiar and alien. Stars, moons, and other celestial bodies are sketched out in cosmic arrangements, hinting at some greater, mysterious order that we are yet to understand. Some sections are dedicated to diagrams of human figures in odd poses, suggesting some kind of ritualistic significance, or perhaps an unknown form of medical or astronomical knowledge. Discovered in 1912 by rare book dealer Wilfrid Voynich in the library of the Jesuit College in Rome, the manuscript has since captivated anyone with a thirst for mystery. Its origins have been traced back to the early 15th century, with carbon dating placing its creation somewhere around 1404 to 1438 AD. But beyond this vague time frame, the mystery deepens. Who could have created such a document, and why? Theories abound, each one more speculative than the last. Mainstream historians lean towards the possibility that the manuscript was the work of a 15th century alchemist or a scholar, with a profound but now lost understanding of a system of knowledge, perhaps one that blended astrology, botany, and ancient mysticism. There are even those who suggest it could have been a work of someone familiar with obscure languages or ciphers, perhaps intentionally designed to be impenetrable for future generations. In this way, the manuscript could have been crafted as an intellectual exercise, meant for a secret society or a personal library where its contents could be deciphered only by those initiated into its mysteries. But the manuscript's true purpose and the identity of its author remain elusive. There are compelling arguments that it could have been the work of a single, brilliant mind, or perhaps the product of several minds working in concert. Some have suggested that the manuscript's designs might indicate an understanding of botanical knowledge far ahead of its time, as some of the plants depicted, though unidentifiable, resemble plants that were only discovered centuries later. Could the author have been in possession of knowledge that was too advanced for the time? If so, how might such knowledge have been acquired? Among the most intriguing aspects of the Voynich manuscript are its illustrations of plants. While some of these images bear a faint resemblance to known species, the vast majority are entirely unfamiliar. No botanist has yet managed to correlate any of the plants with existing species, despite decades of research. In fact, the plants in the manuscript do not adhere to any recognizable classification system. Their forms defy what we know about botany, making it difficult to place them within any known flora from medieval Europe or anywhere else. Yet, there are also no signs that they were created from mere imagination or fantasy. Some of the plants appear too deliberate in their design, their intricate details too careful, to suggest the author was simply indulging in creative license. But could these plants hold a key to understanding the manuscript? Were they perhaps symbolic representations of something deeper, possibly a code for an ancient wisdom or hidden knowledge, passed down through secret traditions? This brings us to the possibility that the manuscript might have served a purpose far beyond a simple botanical record. Could it be a manual for lost or hidden sciences, encoding formulas and diagrams that were meant to remain obscure? Perhaps it was a cipher, with the botanical drawings serving as a metaphorical language, or a complex code that could only be understood by those initiated into the secret traditions of its time. Other researchers have suggested that the manuscript might be the product of a learned scholar from the far reaches of medieval Europe, someone familiar with the ancient and mysterious knowledge preserved in the libraries of far-flung monasteries. Some have pointed to the presence of stars and astrological symbols in the text, suggesting that the manuscript might be a work of astronomical or astrological significance, potentially an alchemical recipe book or guide for divination. The symbols on the pages could represent planetary alignments, time cycles, or astrological patterns that were too intricate to be decoded by modern minds, but perhaps held great meaning for someone versed in the spiritual and scientific practices of the day. Another prominent theory points to the possibility that the Voynich manuscript was not written for a scholarly audience at all, but was instead intended for an elite group engaged in secret rituals or spiritual practices. Its strange symbols and diagrams could be part of a larger occult tradition, possibly related to Gnosticism or other mystical movements that flourished in Europe during the late Middle Ages and the Renaissance. In this view, the manuscript may be an encrypted text, a spiritual or religious treatise whose true meaning has been deliberately obscured, meant only for those who could understand its hidden truths. Yet there is no consensus on the manuscript's content. Some have suggested that the text could be entirely nonsensical, an elaborate hoax designed to confound future generations. After all, history is not without its share of forgeries. Could it be that the manuscript was created simply to perplex and intrigue, a work of creative genius gone awry? If so, why would anyone go to such lengths to create an entire manuscript, complete with sophisticated drawings, just to deceive people centuries later. Even more mysterious is the possibility that the manuscript's origin lies in the lost or forgotten corners of the medieval world, places and peoples whose histories we have scarcely uncovered. Could the manuscript be a remnant of a lost civilization, a forgotten language, or a long-lost tradition that has yet to be understood? Some speculate that it might even have roots in the Byzantine Empire or the ancient Near East, regions that were rich in knowledge and where secrets of alchemy, astrology, and other mystical disciplines were passed down through the ages. If we pause to reflect, what does it mean to hold in our hands a book that seems to defy all logical explanation? And why, in a world of certainty and scientific method, do we still find ourselves drawn to a puzzle that offers no solution? As we gaze upon the pages of the Voynich manuscript, it is impossible not to wonder. Is it a key to a knowledge long lost, or is it a cryptic message from an era that never quite understood what it had created? Perhaps the most unsettling thought is this: what if the manuscript remains unsolved, not because we lack the knowledge to decipher it, but because the knowledge it holds is not meant to be found? And what if, buried within its cryptic script and alien imagery, there are truths that are too complex, too dangerous, or too esoteric for the world to comprehend? The Voynich manuscript, like the greatest mysteries of history, may never yield its secrets to us. But as long as it remains, its strange pages will continue to evoke curiosity, wonder, and above all, a sense that something crucial, something profound, still lies just beyond our grasp. In the vast steppes of Central Asia, where the endless horizon stretches beneath an unbroken sky, the Khazars once ruled an empire that bridged Europe and Asia. Their domain, centered around the Caspian Sea, became a nexus of cultures, religions, and trade. At the height of their power, the Khazars were a formidable force, a confederation of Turkic peoples who controlled vital trade routes between the East and West. Their story, however, is most remembered not for their military might, but for an event that has puzzled historians for centuries: the mysterious and unexplained conversion of the Khazar elite to Judaism in the 8th or 9th century. This unexpected shift in religious allegiance stands out in the annals of history. The Khazars, a people who had followed their own native religions, suddenly and inexplicably turned towards Judaism. The royal family, along with the aristocracy, became Jewish, creating one of the only instances in recorded history where an entire ruling class, and perhaps a large portion of the population, adopted Judaism voluntarily, in contrast to other conversions to Christianity or Islam, which were often political or military in nature. But how and why did this happen? To understand the full weight of this mystery, we must first set the stage. The Khazar Empire existed at the crossroads of several powerful civilizations. In the north, the Rus people were rising as a force in the region, while in the south lay the powerful Arab caliphates, whose influence was spreading across the Middle East and into parts of Europe. The Byzantine Empire, with its Eastern Orthodox Christianity, was a formidable neighbor as well. The Khazars found themselves in a delicate balance between these powerful empires, often playing one against the other in a way that ensured their own survival. As early as the 7th century, Khazar rulers were engaged in diplomacy and trade with both the Byzantine Empire and the Arab caliphates. These interactions were crucial in shaping the Khazar elite's worldview, offering them access to a wide array of cultural and religious ideas. But while the Khazars were pragmatic in their dealings with the major powers of the day, it was a moment of political diplomacy that would lead them down a path few could have foreseen. The most commonly accepted explanation for the Khazars' conversion is found in the diplomatic correspondence that occurred between the Khazar Khagan, the king or supreme ruler, and the Jewish communities of the region. According to some accounts, the Khagan was deeply influenced by the three major world religions: Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. A legend, passed down through generations, tells that the Khagan invited representatives from each of these faiths to present their religions before him, hoping to discern which belief system would best serve the interests of his people. The Christian envoy argued for the superiority of their faith, pointing to the influence of Christianity in the Byzantine Empire. The Muslim representative spoke of the divine truth of Islam, highlighting the growing power of the caliphate and the blessings of aligning with the followers of Muhammad. Finally, the Jewish emissaries made their case, arguing that their ancient faith was unique in its monotheism, its survival through centuries of hardship, and its deep connection to the divine. The Khagan, so the story goes, was intrigued by all three religions, but ultimately found Judaism to be the most appealing. For the Khagan and his court, the decision to adopt Judaism was not a simple religious conversion. It was a political move. By aligning with Judaism, the Khazars could position themselves as distinct from their neighbors, gaining independence from the rising powers of both Christianity and Islam. The conversion allowed the Khazars to forge an identity that was unique, one that could help them navigate the complex political landscape of the 8th century. However, the details surrounding the Khazar conversion remain unclear. While some contemporary sources, such as the Khazar correspondence, mention the conversion, there is a striking lack of concrete historical evidence. No one knows for sure how many Khazars embraced Judaism, or whether the conversion was widespread across the entire population or limited to the ruling elite. Even the timing of the conversion is debated. While some sources suggest that it occurred in the late 8th century, others place it in the 9th century. Moreover, there is uncertainty surrounding the specific nature of the Khazars' conversion. Did the Khazars fully adopt Jewish practices, or did they selectively incorporate Jewish beliefs while maintaining certain elements of their original faith? Some historians argue that the Khazars never fully embraced Judaism in the Orthodox sense, but instead adopted a version of the religion that was tailored to their own political and social needs. The adoption of Judaism could have been a way to distinguish themselves from the nearby Christian and Muslim powers, while also creating a bond with the growing Jewish communities in the region. In the centuries that followed, the Khazars faded into obscurity. Their empire was eventually conquered by the Ruses in the 11th century, and their culture gradually disappeared from history. Yet the question of their conversion to Judaism remained. How much of the Jewish faith did the Khazars adopt, and how much of their original beliefs and practices did they retain? What happened to the Jewish Khazars after the fall of their empire? Did they assimilate into other Jewish communities, or did they disperse and vanish into the wider world? The fate of the Khazars' Jewish population is still unclear. Some suggest that, in the centuries following the fall of the Khazar Empire, the Jewish Khazars were absorbed into other Jewish communities, particularly in Eastern Europe, where their legacy may have left a lasting impact. Others propose that remnants of the Khazar Jewish population may have spread into Palestine, blending into the surrounding cultures and creating connections with the larger Jewish diaspora. Some even suggest that the Khazars' conversion had a lasting influence on the Ashkenazi Jewish population, with DNA studies showing traces of Turkic ancestry among modern Jews from Eastern Europe. Despite these theories, the mystery of the Khazar conversion remains unsolved. Did the Khazars truly convert to Judaism in a widespread manner? Or was the adoption of the faith a political move designed to carve out a unique identity? Were there other factors at play, such as a desire for trade alliances or an effort to unite the various ethnic and religious groups within the Khazar Empire? The question of the Khazars' conversion may never be answered definitively, but their story raises deeper questions about the nature of religion, identity, and power in the medieval world. What drives a people to embrace a new faith? Is it an expression of spiritual truth, or a strategic move to secure political power and independence? And in the case of the Khazars, did their conversion to Judaism shape the course of history in ways we have yet to fully understand? As we look back at the enigmatic conversion of the Khazars, we are left with a sense of wonder and uncertainty. The story of their empire, their religion, and their fate is one that continues to resist easy answers. And perhaps, in the end, it is this very mystery that makes the Khazars' conversion so compelling, a reminder that history is often full of unanswered questions, and that some mysteries may remain forever hidden in the depths of time. The cold winds of the Scandinavian fjords whip through the jagged coastline, carrying with them the haunting echoes of an age long past. Here, amidst the vast, untamed landscapes of the Viking world, something extraordinary once took shape, an artifact of unparalleled craftsmanship and mystery. Among the relics that remain from the Viking Age, few are as puzzling as the Ulfberht swords. These swords, some of the finest examples of Viking weaponry, have been found in burial sites, hoards, and battlefields scattered across Europe, from the icy shores of Denmark to the deep forests of Germany. At first glance, they seem like ordinary weapons, heavy, long-bladed swords designed for combat. But upon closer inspection, there's something far more remarkable about them, a mysterious inscription that reads Ulfberht. This name, etched into the steel of the blade, has led to centuries of speculation. It is not just a signature or a maker's mark. It is a key to a puzzle that has yet to be fully solved. For the Ulfberht swords were not just rare, they were in fact far ahead of their time. Their construction, their metallurgy, and their very existence suggest that the Vikings were wielding a technology and craftsmanship that was unknown to the rest of Europe in the 9th and 10th centuries. To understand the significance of the Ulfberht swords, one must first take a step back into the world of Viking metallurgy. During this period, sword-making was an intricate and highly specialized craft. Iron was the primary material used, but it was often of low quality, requiring careful refinement to create a durable weapon. Yet the Ulfberht swords stand out. The steel of these blades was forged using a technique that, by all accounts, should not have been possible at the time. The swords were made from crucible steel, a material produced by melting iron in a crucible to remove impurities, a process that wasn't fully understood or widely used in Europe until the medieval period. In fact, the method of creating crucible steel had been known in certain parts of the world, particularly in regions like the Middle East and India, but it had not yet spread to Europe. So how did the Vikings manage to craft swords of such remarkable quality? The existence of the Ulfberht swords, with their superior steel, has left historians questioning whether the Vikings had access to lost knowledge of metallurgy, or whether they had developed the technique independently. The first Ulfberht swords were discovered in the 19th century, but their true significance was not fully realized until later. Scholars began to examine the inscriptions on the blades, and what they found deepened the mystery. The word Ulfberht was not just a random mark, it seemed to be the name of a blacksmith or a workshop. Some researchers believe that Ulfberht could have been a master swordsmith, whose name became synonymous with the highest quality craftsmanship. However, the peculiar thing is that many of these swords are dated to a time before the widespread use of crucible steel in Europe, leading some to wonder whether Ulfberht was more than just a name, but possibly a secretive guild or a group of advanced metallurgists. Over the years, several more Ulfberht swords were uncovered, and their features continued to defy the historical understanding of Viking technology. The swords were made from an alloy of steel that was stronger and lighter than anything else in Europe at the time. Their blades were characterized by a distinct pattern of folding, often referred to as pattern welding, which gave the swords a unique appearance. But it wasn't just the craftsmanship that made these swords so remarkable, it was the inscription itself. The Ulfberht swords bore a symbol that was unusual for the time. The inscription was not in Latin, which was the dominant language for Christian inscriptions in Europe, but rather in Old Norse. This suggests that the blades were crafted by a specific group of Vikings, possibly a group with ties to the Scandinavian royal families. What is even more intriguing, however, is the presence of later Ulfberht swords that carry the name Ulfberht inscribed on them, but with a crucial difference. The material used to forge the blades was not of the same high quality as the original swords. This raises the possibility that the name Ulfberht was somehow stolen or appropriated by other swordsmiths. By the time these later swords were forged, the true craftsmanship associated with the Ulfberht brand had been lost, but the name itself still carried weight. These imitation Ulfberht swords were made from inferior materials and were far less durable than the originals. What does this suggest about the meaning of the name Ulfberht? Was it a mark of quality, or was it perhaps something more? A symbol of lost knowledge, a name that carried with it an aura of mystery and power. The Ulfberht swords challenge our understanding of Viking society. Were these swords part of a secret tradition, a hidden craft passed down through generations, possibly from an ancient knowledge of metallurgy? Or was their creation the result of trade or cultural exchange with distant civilizations? The possibility that the Vikings may have had access to advanced technologies from the East or from the Islamic world has long been a subject of speculation. Could the Ulfberht swords have been the product of some lost connection between Viking smiths and the cultures of the Middle East, where crucible steel was known and used centuries before it reached Europe? Was the name Ulfberht not just the mark of a master smith, but a symbol of this hidden connection? Moreover, what if the Ulfberht swords weren't simply extraordinary weapons, but symbols of something deeper? A reflection of the Vikings' connections to a wider, more interconnected world. The Viking Age, after all, was a time of significant exploration and trade, with the Norse peoples journeying far beyond their Scandinavian homeland. Could the swords have been part of a larger global network of knowledge and trade, a fragment of a lost age of metallurgy? While some may argue that the Ulfberht swords were simply the products of highly skilled Viking craftsmen, others suggest that there may have been something far more complex at play. Perhaps these swords were the remnants of a lost tradition, a craft that connected the Vikings to a more ancient and sophisticated knowledge of metallurgy, one that has since disappeared from history. As we stand before these magnificent swords, with their sharp blades and mysterious inscriptions, we are left to wonder, how did the Vikings, with their rugged, often harsh existence, come to possess such advanced craftsmanship? Did they, in some way, possess knowledge that the rest of Europe did not? Or is the true story of the Ulfberht swords yet to be uncovered, waiting to reveal a hidden chapter of Viking history? The mystery of the Ulfberht swords remains unsolved, their origins still shrouded in the fog of time. As we examine the sharp, gleaming steel and the intricate markings on these weapons, we can only ask, what secrets might still lie hidden in their depths? The earth is quiet. In the rolling hills of Suffolk, England, the landscape stretches out like a tapestry of green and brown, dotted with ancient trees and meandering rivers. It's hard to imagine, in the midst of this pastoral serenity, that beneath the soil lies a discovery that would forever alter our understanding of Anglo-Saxon England. Here, in the mid-20th century, one of the most extraordinary archaeological finds in British history was made, a burial site that would become known as Sutton Hoo. The site itself is eerily quiet, but the excavation in 1939 revealed something extraordinary. A large, imposing ship burial, containing a wealth of grave goods that spanned centuries of history. The scale of the burial, along with its rich array of artifacts, raised questions that still linger today. What was the true purpose of the Sutton Hoo burial, and why had such a lavish, elaborate grave been constructed? In the summer of 1939, archaeologist Basil Brown uncovered the first signs of the burial mound. What he didn't know at the time was that beneath his feet lay a vessel, an ancient ship, preserved in the earth for over a millennium. But it wasn't just a ship. It was a symbol, a marker of a time when England was in flux, a time when the old world was meeting the new, when tribal kingdoms and rising empires collided. And it was a time of immense wealth, a wealth that had been left behind for all these centuries. The excavation revealed a remarkable scene. At the heart of the burial, resting in the center of the ship, was the body of a man, surrounded by a rich array of treasures. These were not just ordinary grave goods. They were the possessions of a ruler, perhaps a king, whose identity remains unknown. Gold, silver, and bronze gleamed in the sunlight, with objects that reflected the warrior culture of the time: shields, swords, armor, and a ceremonial helmet of striking beauty. There was also a great deal of precious material from far beyond the shores of England: glass, metal, and cloth from as far away as the Byzantine Empire, hinting at a far-reaching network of trade and diplomacy. Among these items was a shield embossed with intricate designs, a sword with delicate engravings, and a beautiful ceremonial helmet, all of which pointed to a person of immense status. But there is one thing that stands out about the Sutton Hoo burial more than anything else: the ship itself. The burial mound was clearly designed to honor the deceased as someone of immense importance. The ship, measuring over 80 feet long, was clearly a symbol of the man's wealth and status, a vessel that might have been intended for use in the afterlife. The ship was a vessel for the journey into the next world, a final means of transport for a powerful leader's soul, a theme that echoes throughout other burial practices of the time. Yet the scale and grandeur of the ship suggest a purpose far beyond the ordinary. It is almost as if the ship had been meant to serve not only as a marker of the man's status in life, but also as a monument to his lasting legacy, a legacy that would endure long after his death. However, this leads to a central question that has plagued historians and archaeologists since the discovery. Who was this person? The ship burial strongly suggests that the individual buried at Sutton Hoo was a king, or at the very least, someone of the highest rank, but no historical records have definitively linked the burial to a specific ruler of the time. Some have speculated that the grave belonged to King Raedwald of East Anglia, a powerful figure who ruled during the early 7th century, but this theory is far from conclusive. King Raedwald was a known ruler of the Anglo-Saxon kingdom of East Anglia, and the grave's wealth and significance have led some to suggest that it was his final resting place. Raedwald's reign is believed to have coincided with a period of great cultural exchange, when Christianity began to seep into Anglo-Saxon society, and the burial at Sutton Hoo could be seen as an attempt to preserve traditional pagan beliefs, even as new religious practices were taking hold. If this theory holds true, the Sutton Hoo burial would serve as a physical manifestation of the cultural crossroads at which England stood during this transitional period. Yet, while Raedwald is a plausible candidate, there are those who argue that the burial might belong to a different ruler altogether, or perhaps a more symbolic figure, such as a warrior chieftain or a religious leader. The complete lack of clear identification raises a fundamental question. Was the burial at Sutton Hoo intended solely for the purpose of honoring a single individual, or was it an expression of a wider cultural and religious belief system that transcended any one person's identity? In many ways, Sutton Hoo offers a glimpse into the mindset of the Anglo-Saxon elite. The grandeur of the burial site suggests that the people of East Anglia believed in a complex afterlife, a world where material wealth and physical prowess could be carried into the next life. The placement of the ship, the burial goods, and the lavishness of the burial suggest a belief in the continuing significance of the ruler even after death. Was the burial a representation of the desire for immortality, a way for the deceased to continue his rule in the afterlife? Or was it a symbol of the powerful connection between the living and the dead, a way for the living to honor their ancestors and ensure their continued favor? What is perhaps most intriguing about Sutton Hoo, however, is the mystery that surrounds its purpose. While the idea of a king's burial is the most widely accepted interpretation, the sheer scale and nature of the burial site suggest that it may have been more than just a royal tomb. Some have proposed that it was a burial for a religious leader, perhaps someone who played a central role in the introduction of Christianity to the Anglo-Saxon world. Others suggest that the Sutton Hoo burial could have been a place of ritual sacrifice or a ceremonial site associated with royal power and spiritual beliefs. What if Sutton Hoo wasn't just a king's burial, but a site that was designed to commemorate the spiritual power and authority of the leader, marking a transformation from one world to the next? Could it have been a place of pilgrimage for the living, a site where kings and warriors alike came to honor their ancestors and to seek favor from the gods? And then there is the possibility that Sutton Hoo was part of a larger tradition, a grander religious or cultural ceremony of which we know little. Could it have been a ritualized performance that was meant to mark a turning point in history, a time when old beliefs clashed with new ones? If so, what else might we have missed in our understanding of the early Anglo-Saxon world? The answers to these questions remain elusive. Sutton Hoo has given us a breathtaking glimpse into a lost world, but the full story of its purpose, whether it was a royal burial, a religious site, or something else entirely, remains shrouded in mystery. The ship, the treasures, the rituals, all point to a significance that is beyond mere material wealth. They tell a story of belief, of power, and of legacy, but the details of that story remain hidden in the soil of Suffolk, waiting for future generations to uncover. The Sutton Hoo burial serves as a reminder that history is full of unspoken stories, and even the most extraordinary discoveries leave us with more questions than answers. What is the true significance of this ancient burial site? And what might still lie buried beneath the earth, waiting to be revealed? In a quiet room, lit by the soft glow of ancient candlelight, one of the most breathtaking objects in the history of Western civilization rests on display, a book that has survived for over 1,000 years, its pages a testament to artistry, devotion, and mystery. The Book of Kells, a masterpiece of medieval manuscript illumination, is much more than a religious text. It is a window into a lost world, a silent enigma, its pages filled with symbols, colors, and images that seem to tell stories beyond the words themselves. The book, housed today at Trinity College, Dublin, is as much a marvel for its intricate artistry as for the mysteries it conceals. Its vivid illustrations, golden scrollwork, and interwoven Celtic knots form a tapestry of visual splendor surrounding the text of the 4 Gospels of the New Testament. But beneath the surface of this exquisite craftsmanship lies a deeper question. What hidden meanings, if any, lie embedded in the illuminations, the symbols, and the seemingly odd choices made by its creators? It's easy to see why the Book of Kells has captivated generations of scholars and mystics alike. The manuscript itself is a product of the 9th century, its creation believed to be the work of monks from the Columban tradition in Ireland. Yet, despite the many centuries of study, the true intentions of its creators remain as elusive as the ink on its pages. Some have seen in the manuscript the theological insights of its time, others the reflection of cultural and political power. But few would deny that the book holds a secret, a mystery that resists the simplicity of mere historical analysis. Let us begin with the book's appearance. The first thing that strikes you about the Book of Kells is the opulence of its pages. Richly decorated with vibrant reds, blues, and greens, the manuscript seems to pulse with life. On each page, there is a deliberate fusion of text and art, with intricate designs framing the written word, spiraling patterns of knots, birds, and beasts that swirl around the Gospels. The imagery itself is powerful. Vivid illustrations of saints, angels, and biblical scenes are brought to life in ways that suggest both reverence and artistic mastery. There is no doubt that the creators were skilled artisans, but there is also something more, something almost mystical about the way these images seem to transcend the text itself. For centuries, scholars have pondered the meanings behind these illuminations. What was the purpose of the abstract spirals, the looping geometric shapes, the animal forms interwoven with Christian iconography? Why were certain symbols repeated, while others appeared to have been deliberately obscured or distorted? At the heart of the Book of Kells' mystery is its symbolism. Celtic art, rich in its use of interlacing patterns and knots, was deeply rooted in the spiritual beliefs of ancient Ireland, where the concept of eternity, of the unbroken cycle of life, was central to the worldview. The intricate designs in the manuscript are thought to symbolize the eternal nature of God, the interconnectedness of creation, and the divine order of the universe. But beyond these standard interpretations, there are elements that seem almost out of place in a Christian manuscript. Some scholars suggest that certain designs in the Book of Kells may have roots in earlier pagan traditions, possibly reflecting the syncretic blend of beliefs that characterized Ireland during the 9th century, as Christianity was making its way across the land. For instance, the iconic image of the Chi-Rho page, one of the most famous in the manuscript, features a dramatic interplay of letters and imagery. The Chi-Rho monogram, the first 2 letters of Christ in Greek, is adorned with extravagant interlace, forming what could be interpreted as both a divine symbol and a pagan spiral. The complexity of the design is so intricate that one cannot help but wonder if it's more than just a visual embellishment. Is there a deeper meaning behind the use of such ornate, almost hypnotic patterns? Could they serve to evoke the divine in a way that bypasses the intellect and speaks directly to the spirit? As we move through the pages of the Book of Kells, we encounter more perplexing symbols. On some pages, the images of animals, such as lions, peacocks, and fish, appear not just as illustrative details, but as symbols that seem to carry a deeper meaning. The peacock, for example, was a symbol of immortality in early Christian thought, yet its repeated appearance throughout the manuscript seems to suggest something more complex. Is it possible that the artists were not just concerned with illustrating the gospel, but also weaving in these symbols of life, death, and rebirth from pre-Christian Irish tradition? Moreover, some of the animal forms in the manuscript appear so distorted that they can scarcely be recognized. It is almost as though the artists were deliberately pushing the boundaries of iconography, trying to imbue the symbols with layers of meaning that were beyond conventional Christian interpretation. Could this have been a reflection of the mystical or even secretive beliefs of the monks who worked on the manuscript? Were they, perhaps, attempting to encode hidden messages within the designs, messages that we have yet to fully comprehend? Yet, while the artwork and symbolism are a central part of the Book of Kells' mystery, it is the manuscript's sheer craftsmanship that adds to the intrigue. The book itself was created in an era when such lavish manuscripts were exceedingly rare, and the level of detail and precision in the illumination suggests that its creators were working with an exceptional understanding of materials and technique. The pigments used to produce the colors are of a quality rarely seen in medieval manuscripts. Some of them are made from precious materials such as gold leaf, lapis lazuli, and cinnabar, indicating that the Book of Kells was not only a spiritual artifact, but also a display of immense cultural and political power. It's been suggested that the manuscript may have been created as a political statement as much as a religious one. At the time of its creation, Ireland was a land of fragmented kingdoms, and the creation of such an elaborate work of art could have served as a tool of unity, a way to project the power of the church and the ruling elite. But this raises another question. To whom was the Book of Kells truly dedicated? Was it intended for the Irish kings and nobility, or was it meant to serve a wider purpose, perhaps as a means of reinforcing the power of the Christian Church in the face of pagan resistance. As we delve deeper into the history of the Book of Kells, we are confronted with yet another layer of mystery: its disappearance. The manuscript has not always been housed in Trinity College. For centuries, its whereabouts were uncertain. Some historians believe it was hidden during Viking invasions, while others suggest it was moved to protect it from secular powers. Why was this book hidden away so many times? And what significance did it hold for those who guarded it so fiercely? The answers are unclear, but it is certain that the Book of Kells was more than just a text. It was a sacred object, one that perhaps held secrets too powerful to be easily revealed. Today, as we gaze upon the illuminated pages of the Book of Kells, we can't help but feel that there is something just out of reach, something buried within its intricate lines, spirals, and icons. Was it simply a masterpiece of artistic expression, or was it a coded message, a map to hidden knowledge that has been lost to time? And if so, what does that say about the nature of the monks who created it, and about the mysteries of their time? The Book of Kells remains, as it has for centuries, a quiet enigma, its meanings not fully understood, its secrets perhaps still waiting to be uncovered. What hidden messages, buried deep within its pages, might still be waiting to reveal themselves? And in the glow of its illuminated verses, what truths might we have yet to discover about the spiritual world of the early medieval Christians, and about the nature of human belief itself? In the quiet fields of Eastern Europe, beneath the rolling hills and ancient forests, lies a story that has faded into the mists of time. The Avars, a once powerful, enigmatic people, appeared seemingly out of nowhere, leaving behind only shadows of their empire. Then, just as mysteriously as they arrived, they vanished, leaving historians, archaeologists, and even the most seasoned scholars grasping for answers. What happened to the Avars? How did a people who dominated vast territories, forged alliances, and were feared by their neighbors simply disappear? To understand the disappearance of the Avars, one must first travel back to the 6th century, a time when the Eastern Roman Empire was struggling to maintain its power against a multitude of barbarian tribes. Among these tribes, the Avars were a force to be reckoned with. Little is known of their origins, but by the 550s, they had swept into Europe from the vast steppes of Central Asia, a people known for their horsemanship, their military prowess, and their unyielding ambition. They established a powerful khaganate, an empire of sorts, that stretched from the Carpathian Basin in the west to the steppes of modern-day Kazakhstan in the east. The Avars were a confederation of Turkic and Mongolic tribes, but their military organization and fierce warriors made them a significant threat to the Byzantine Empire, the Frankish Kingdom, and other neighboring powers. They were skilled in the use of heavy cavalry, and their armies were capable of striking with speed and precision, often raiding cities and settlements with ruthless efficiency. At the height of their power, they controlled vast swaths of territory in what is now Hungary, Romania, and parts of Austria, while their raids reached into modern-day Italy and the Balkans. But despite their power and military might, the Avars were always an enigma to their neighbors. Their language remains largely undeciphered, and little is known about their culture, religion, or social structure. What we do know about them comes from Byzantine records and the accounts of neighboring peoples who were often both awed and fearful of the Avars. These accounts paint a picture of a society that was both fierce and organized, but one that lacked the strong written records that might have left behind a more coherent history. The Avars' most notable achievement was their military campaigns against the Byzantine Empire, a conflict that would continue for several decades. In the early 600s, they were instrumental in the destruction of the Slavic kingdom of the Gepids, who had once been their allies. This victory solidified the Avars' dominance in the region, and their power seemed unassailable. They were formidable adversaries, and their Khagan, or leader, was considered one of the most influential figures in the steppes. But just as the Avars reached the zenith of their power, something extraordinary began to happen. Over the course of the 8th century, the Avars seemed to lose their grip on the territories they had once controlled. Their military strength began to wane, and their alliances with neighboring peoples frayed. They were gradually pushed back by the Franks, led by Charlemagne, and their territory began to shrink. By the time of the 9th century, the once powerful Avar Khaganate had been reduced to a shadow of its former self. But here's where the mystery deepens. The Avars did not simply fade away in a predictable manner like many of the other tribes and empires of the period. Instead, their disappearance is marked by a complete lack of historical records. The Avars vanished from the annals of history with little trace, leaving historians to wonder, did they simply dissolve into the surrounding populations, or was something more mysterious at play? The historical record provides few clues as to why the Avars disappeared. Some scholars have suggested that the collapse of their empire was due to external forces, most notably the military campaigns of Charlemagne and the Franks. The Avars were eventually defeated by the Franks in the early 9th century, and their power dwindled as a result. It's plausible that the collapse of their empire was a slow, gradual process, with the Avars being absorbed into neighboring kingdoms or tribes. But there are elements of the Avars' disappearance that don't fit neatly into this explanation. For example, there is little evidence of a large-scale migration or cultural assimilation. Instead, the Avars seem to have simply vanished. The archaeological record is silent on what happened to the Avar people. In contrast to the well-documented collapses of other empires, the Avars left behind no mass graves, no definitive signs of forced displacement, and no large-scale cultural integration into the surrounding regions. What then happened to them? One theory suggests that the Avars were gradually absorbed into the surrounding Slavic populations, who were expanding at the time. Some believe that the Avars, once defeated and weakened, may have simply melted into the fabric of the Slavic world, their distinct identity disappearing over time. In this scenario, the Avars' disappearance may have been a slow process of cultural assimilation, where their language, customs, and traditions were lost to history. However, this theory raises its own questions. The Avars were known for their distinct culture and military prowess. How could such a unique people simply vanish without leaving any trace of their identity behind? If the Avars had been absorbed into the Slavic population, why is there so little archaeological evidence to support this idea? And why did their name disappear from the historical record so suddenly, without any clear indication of what had happened to them? Another possibility is that the Avars were displaced by the expansion of the Byzantine Empire or the Franks, who were steadily encroaching on their territory. If the Avars had been pushed into remote regions or subjected to forced relocation, their cultural identity could have been erased. Yet again, the lack of evidence for such a displacement is puzzling. The Avars were a formidable force in their time, and it seems unlikely that they could have been simply absorbed or displaced without leaving some sort of trace behind. Some scholars have even suggested that the Avars may have suffered a more catastrophic fate. The sudden collapse of their empire, coupled with the lack of historical records, has led to speculation that the Avars might have been struck by a mysterious epidemic, or even a series of devastating raids from other peoples. Could it be that their disappearance was the result of a violent, sudden event, a catastrophe that wiped out their society in a way that left few survivors to tell the tale? The Avars' mysterious silence in the historical record leaves this possibility open, though it remains purely speculative. Yet, there's another theory, one that's even more speculative, but perhaps more intriguing. Could the Avars have disappeared intentionally? Some have suggested that the Avars may have chosen to abandon their identity altogether, either as a form of survival or as part of a religious or cultural transformation? Could the Avars have undergone a form of self-imposed obliteration, shedding their name and identity in favor of a new way of life? This would explain the sudden disappearance from the historical record, but it remains one of the more elusive and challenging theories to prove. The mystery of the Avars' disappearance remains unsolved. What we do know is that a people who once dominated much of Eastern Europe, who were known for their military might and political savvy, have left little more than an enigma in their wake. Were they absorbed by their neighbors, or did something more violent and dramatic lead to their disappearance? And if the Avars truly vanished without a trace, could it be that there is more to this mystery than we have yet uncovered? As we reflect on the story of the Avars, we are left with more questions than answers. Their disappearance, whether by conquest, assimilation, or some other force, remains one of the most perplexing mysteries in history. What happened to the Avars, and why did they leave so little evidence of their fate? The answers may still be hidden, buried in the sands of time, waiting to be uncovered. But until then, the mystery of the Avars' disappearance remains, a haunting reminder of the fragility of empires and the fleeting nature of history itself. The desert stretches out before you, a vast and barren expanse, where the earth is parched and the sky seems to stretch endlessly overhead. The heat is intense, the silence profound. Yet, within this desolate landscape, something extraordinary lies hidden beneath the sun-baked ground. The Nazca lines. These ancient geoglyphs, etched into the arid plains of southern Peru, are a mystery that has captivated the imagination of historians, archaeologists, and explorers for centuries. The lines themselves are both stunning and perplexing. Stretching over an area of nearly 50 square miles, they are composed of hundreds of geometric shapes, animal figures, and mysterious patterns. From the air, the scale of the geoglyphs becomes truly apparent. Some of the figures are so large that they can only be fully appreciated from above. The famous hummingbird, spider, and monkey are some of the most recognizable designs, their intricate lines and curves etched into the earth with remarkable precision. The true purpose of these lines has remained elusive. When they were first discovered in the 1920s by pilots flying over the region, they sparked a wave of speculation. Some saw them as a form of ancient astronomy, pointing to constellations or marking celestial events. Others believed the lines were created as part of religious rituals, perhaps to honor the gods or communicate with deities. Still, others proposed more fantastical theories. Some even suggested that the Nazca people were attempting to signal extraterrestrial visitors. While the earlier phases of the Nazca lines are generally accepted to have been created by the Nazca civilization between 500 BCE and 500 CE, it is the later phases of these geoglyphs that continue to provoke deep questions. As the centuries passed, the lines evolved. Some designs were expanded, others altered, and new shapes appeared. Why did the Nazca people continue to create these lines for hundreds of years? What was the purpose behind the changes made to the lines over time, and what did these later additions represent? One thing that stands out in the later phases of the Nazca lines is the increasing complexity of the designs. The earlier, more straightforward geometric patterns, like the simple trapezoids and straight lines, gave way to increasingly intricate forms: animals, human figures, and complex spirals. These later lines appear to have been carefully crafted, with specific attention to proportions and spatial relationships, as though the creators were seeking to convey a more refined understanding of their world. Some of the later lines, particularly those from the 7th and 8th centuries, suggest an evolution in the spiritual or ritualistic significance of the geoglyphs. The designs that began as geometric shapes and simple animals transformed into representations of deities, spirits, and natural forces. The symbolism behind these changes is still open to interpretation. Did the Nazca people begin to incorporate their growing knowledge of the stars and the cosmos into their sacred practices? Were the lines a way of charting a changing relationship with the environment, or were they a more direct form of communication with gods or ancestors? One of the most intriguing aspects of the later Nazca lines is the appearance of figures that are not easily explained by traditional theories. For example, the enigmatic figure known as the astronaut, discovered in the 1960s, is a large geoglyph that appears to show a humanoid figure with a helmet and suit, resembling modern depictions of space travelers. While mainstream scholars argue that this figure is likely just a stylized depiction of a human, the possibility that it is something more remains tantalizing. Could it represent a symbolic figure, a god or spiritual entity? Or does it suggest a connection to an ancient understanding of the cosmos, one that might have been far more advanced than we currently give the Nazca people credit for? As with the earlier phases, the purpose of the later geoglyphs remains unclear. Some researchers argue that the lines were a way for the Nazca people to mark sacred sites or ritual paths, guiding participants in religious ceremonies. The elaborate designs could have been used in ceremonies that were meant to invoke or honor the gods, perhaps to ensure the fertility of the land or to gain favor in times of drought. The figures, with their intricate lines and shapes, may have been an attempt to communicate with the divine, an offering or a prayer that could only be seen by the gods from above. This theory is supported by the fact that many of the lines align with the movements of the sun and stars, suggesting a deep connection between the geoglyphs and the cosmos. Other theories suggest that the later lines may have had a more practical purpose, perhaps related to water management or agricultural practices. The Nazca civilization thrived in an extremely arid region, where water was a precious and often scarce resource. Could the geoglyphs have been part of a complex system to guide the flow of water or to mark important water sources? Some scholars point to the fact that many of the lines are located near ancient aqueducts, which were used to bring water to the region. It's possible that the geoglyphs were part of a larger symbolic system that helped the Nazca people manage their most vital resource, water. But while these ideas are compelling, they still fail to fully explain the mystery of the Nazca lines. What motivated the people to continue creating these geoglyphs for centuries, even as their civilization began to decline? The lines, after all, were not easy to create. They required a deep knowledge of engineering, astronomy, and art. The labor involved in creating these vast designs, removing the top layer of reddish-brown stones to reveal the lighter sand beneath, would have been immense. Why, then, would the Nazca continue to expend such effort on these monumental projects, especially as their resources became scarcer and their society began to fragment? Some scholars have proposed that the later phases of the Nazca lines represent a shift in religious or cultural practices, as the civilization adapted to changing conditions. Could the new figures and designs reflect a spiritual evolution, a shift in how the Nazca people viewed their relationship with the earth and the cosmos? Perhaps the lines were no longer simply a form of communication with the gods, but a symbol of survival, a last, desperate attempt to hold on to their cultural identity in the face of environmental and social pressures. The changes in the Nazca lines over time also raise the question of how the Nazca people themselves changed. The geoglyphs may have served as a mirror of their society, a reflection of their spiritual beliefs, social organization, and political struggles. As the civilization evolved, so too did the designs on the plains. But what does this tell us about the people who created them? Were the lines an expression of power, a way for leaders to communicate their authority to the people? Or were they an expression of unity, a collective effort that transcended individual rulers or social classes? Despite the various theories, one thing remains certain. The later phases of the Nazca lines only deepen the mystery. The lines themselves, whether they were created as offerings to the gods, as agricultural markers, or as symbolic representations of spiritual beliefs, remain an enigmatic legacy of a people whose story we have only begun to understand. As we gaze upon the complex forms etched into the dry desert floor, we are left with more questions than answers. What was the true purpose of the later phases of the Nazca lines? Were they a final attempt to communicate with the divine, a reflection of changing religious practices, or something entirely different? And what might we still be missing about the Nazca people's knowledge of the world around them, their mastery of astronomy, or their connection to the earth? The answers remain just out of reach, hidden beneath the sands of time, waiting to be uncovered by those who are willing to look closer, to dig deeper, and to question what we think we know about this ancient civilization. The sun is low in the sky, casting long shadows over the stone ruins of ancient castles and monasteries, their weathered surfaces telling stories of battles fought and secrets kept. The very air seems thick with history, as if the past refuses to leave, lingering just beyond reach. In the dimming light of dusk, one might imagine the clink of armor, the murmur of Latin prayers, and the stern gaze of men sworn to a higher cause. Among the mysteries of this landscape is the origin of an order that has fascinated historians for centuries, the Knights Templar. But before they rose to prominence, before their legend was written in the blood of crusades and the whispers of treasure hunts, there were precursors to their order, groups, individuals, and ideas that shaped their formation and continue to puzzle modern scholars. To understand the Knights Templar, we must first step back in time, to a period of immense spiritual and political upheaval. The 11th century was a time when Europe was a patchwork of kingdoms, each vying for power, and the Christian world was undergoing profound transformations. The rise of the Templars, an order founded in the early 12th century, was inextricably linked to the Crusades, those religious wars fought in the name of reclaiming the Holy Land from Muslim control. But what is often overlooked is that the Templars did not emerge out of thin air. They were shaped by a confluence of ideas, influences, and even older traditions that had long been simmering beneath the surface. In the shadow of the Crusades, there were earlier, lesser-known orders, some of which had their own military and religious goals. These precursors are often obscured by the passage of time, but their influence is undeniable. Many of these groups shared common ideals: loyalty to the church, a devotion to the protection of pilgrims, and the idea of a warrior monastic order that combined religious piety with martial skill. Their origins are shrouded in mystery, with some speculating that they were influenced by earlier religious warrior orders, such as the Hospitallers, the Knights of St. John, or even by secretive traditions that predated Christianity itself. The first hint of these precursors can be traced back to the early 11th century, just before the First Crusade. During this time, the Christian Church was in the midst of its own internal struggles, wrestling with the question of how to expand its influence and protect its followers. Pilgrimages to the Holy Land had been a common practice for centuries, but with the rise of Islam in the 7th century, travel to Jerusalem had become increasingly dangerous. Christian pilgrims were often harassed or attacked, and the Church was desperate for a solution. It was at this point that some of the earliest precursor orders began to emerge. The most notable of these was the Knights Hospitaller, an order founded around 1099 to provide aid and protection to Christian pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land. These knights, who took vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, established a presence in Jerusalem and worked to ensure the safety of pilgrims from bandits and marauding Muslim forces. They were some of the first to blend military prowess with religious devotion, a model that would later influence the formation of the Templars. But the Hospitallers were not alone. In the same period, other religious and military groups began to form with similar missions. One of the most enigmatic of these was the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, the official name of the Knights Templar. The group was founded in 1119 by Hugues de Payens and 8 other knights, with the expressed purpose of protecting Christian pilgrims in the Holy Land. But what's fascinating about the Templars' origins is that they were not the only group operating in Jerusalem at the time. The Holy City was a hotbed of religious fervor, with various military orders vying for power and influence. Historians often point to the Templars' connection to the Crusader states in the Levant, but it's important to recognize that their rise was also tied to the broader context of medieval chivalry and monasticism. The idea of combining the warrior's code with religious vows was not entirely new, but the Templars perfected it in a way that was uniquely powerful. But why did they, of all the orders, rise to such prominence? And what, if any, earlier influences helped shape their particular brand of warrior monasticism? To begin answering these questions, we must look further back, to the world before the Crusades. Could the roots of the Templars' beliefs and practices extend to the religious and military orders that predated them? Some researchers argue that the Templars' monastic warrior ideals were influenced by ancient religious orders, even those in the distant past of Palestine. There are tantalizing hints that the early Templars were not just following the tradition of the Hospitallers or other Crusader orders, but also drawing from secretive traditions that stretched back to the ancient world, to times when religious orders were tied to the protection of sacred knowledge. One of the most intriguing and controversial theories is that the Templars were connected to the ancient Gnostic or esoteric traditions. Gnosticism, with its emphasis on hidden knowledge and spiritual enlightenment, was considered heretical by the mainstream church, yet it persisted in various forms throughout the medieval period. Some scholars have suggested that the Templars' secretive nature, their cryptic rituals, and their supposed knowledge of hidden treasures, such as the Holy Grail or the Ark of the Covenant, might be linked to Gnostic or even pre-Christian beliefs. This theory hinges on the idea that the Templars were not just a military order, but a repository of ancient knowledge that had been passed down through generations in secret. Could the Templars have been connected to the ancient mystery schools of Egypt, or even the secretive sects that existed in the time of the Roman Empire? These schools, known for their arcane teachings and emphasis on esoteric wisdom, may have influenced the early formation of religious warrior orders, including the Templars. In addition to these esoteric theories, there is the more practical explanation of the Templars' origins, which ties their rise to the growing power of the Christian Church and the political dynamics of the Crusades. The Templars, as a military order, had both the blessing of the Church and the political backing of the Crusader states. They were granted immense wealth and land, allowing them to become a powerful force in Europe and the Levant. Their role as protectors of pilgrims and their strategic importance in the Crusades cannot be overstated. But even in this more grounded explanation, the Templars' meteoric rise still raises questions. Why did they, and not other similar orders, garner such wealth and influence? Could it have been their ability to cultivate connections with key figures in the church and political elites? Or was there something more to their success? A hidden force at play, perhaps tied to their secretive rituals, their access to ancient knowledge, or the mythical symbols they employed? Another possible precursor to the Templars may lie in the ancient traditions of the Knights of the Holy Sepulchre, a group that dates back to the earliest years of Christian pilgrimage to Jerusalem. These knights were dedicated to the protection of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, which was considered one of the most sacred sites in Christendom. Their focus on guarding holy relics and their military role in the protection of Christian pilgrims could have laid the groundwork for the Templars' later activities. In any case, the precursors to the Templars were not a single, unified group. Rather, they were a constellation of military, religious, and philosophical traditions that gradually converged to form the powerful and secretive order we know today. From the Hospitallers to the Knights of the Holy Sepulchre, and from the Gnostic traditions to the political maneuverings of the Crusader states, the rise of the Templars was a complex process, one that defies easy explanations. What's clear is that the origins of the Knights Templar were not the result of a singular, isolated event. They were the culmination of centuries of religious, military, and philosophical currents, many of which have left only faint traces in the historical record. Their legacy, steeped in mystery, continues to fascinate and bewilder. What knowledge did they protect? And what was the true purpose of their rituals? What role did these earlier influences play in the formation of their legendary order? The answers remain buried in time, and as the centuries pass, the mystery of the Templars' precursors only deepens, inviting further exploration into the shadows of history. Far out on the horizon, where the sea meets the sky in a seemingly endless expanse, there is a place whispered about in the myths and legends of ancient seafarers: Hy-Brasil. The very name evokes an air of mystery, conjuring images of a lost world, an island shrouded in fog, hidden just beyond the reach of all but the most intrepid explorers. For centuries, the story of Hy-Brasil has tantalized the imagination, an island that appeared on maps and in the accounts of sailors, only to vanish from view, leaving no trace behind. But was it merely a fantasy? A mirage born of myth? Or could there be some truth to the legend? The first recorded mention of Hy-Brasil comes from the early Middle Ages, a time when the shores of Europe were still unknown to many. The island is most often depicted as lying to the west of Ireland, often shrouded in mist or obscured by a veil of fog. Ancient maps, dating as far back as the 14th century, often include Hy-Brasil as a place of great significance, an island of unknown origin, with a location that seemed to shift depending on the cartographer. What was it about this island that captivated the imagination of those who charted the seas and explored the uncharted? On some maps, Hy-Brasil was drawn as a large, fertile island, rich in resources and steeped in mystery. Early descriptions of the island paint it as a utopian land, inhabited by wise beings, sometimes referred to as druids or sages, who were said to possess immense knowledge and magical powers. The island itself was often described as a place where time flowed differently, where it appeared only once every 7 years, emerging from the mist for brief periods before disappearing again, never to be seen for another 7 years. For many, Hy-Brasil was more than just a geographic location. It became a symbol of the elusive, a reminder of the unknown realms of the world, forever just beyond reach. But was there any truth behind these fantastical tales? The mystery of Hy-Brasil begins with the earliest cartographic references to the island. In 1325, the famous Italian mapmaker Angelino Dolcert included Hy-Brasil in his chart, placing it off the west coast of Ireland. Over the centuries, the island continued to appear in various maps, sometimes depicted as a large landmass, other times as a small, solitary dot. Some maps even placed the island at varying distances from Ireland, making it seem as if its very position was in flux, as if it could only be seen under certain conditions. One of the most intriguing early references comes from the expeditions of St. Brendan, a medieval Irish narrative that tells the story of a legendary voyage across the Atlantic in search of the Isle of the Blessed. In this story, St. Brendan and his fellow monks sail westward from Ireland, eventually discovering an island that seems to defy the rules of geography. Could this mythical island have been Hy-Brasil? Some historians and researchers suggest that St. Brendan's tale may have been based on real events. Perhaps the monks did venture across the sea and encounter an island, though whether that island was truly Hy-Brasil or simply a misunderstanding or embellishment of another location is unclear. As time went on, Hy-Brasil continued to be a subject of fascination for explorers and cartographers alike. In the 16th century, maps of the Atlantic Ocean began to include the island with greater frequency. The island's appearance on these maps was sometimes accompanied by notations claiming that it was inhabited or rich in resources. Some explorers even set out on expeditions to find the island, but all returned empty-handed, their quests ultimately deemed fruitless. Perhaps one of the most curious aspects of Hy-Brasil's story is its recurring connection to a fog or mist that seemed to shroud it. According to some accounts, sailors would venture westward, catching a glimpse of the island only for it to disappear before their eyes, swallowed by the fog as quickly as it had appeared. This has led some to suggest that the island could have been nothing more than a mirage, a phenomenon caused by the refraction of light over the ocean's surface, creating the illusion of an island where none existed. These phantom islands were not uncommon in early maps, with other supposed landmasses appearing and disappearing on explorers' charts, only to be later proven to be figments of the imagination. But the idea of Hy-Brasil as a mirage does not fully explain its persistent presence on maps for centuries, or the numerous accounts from sailors who reported seeing the island before it vanished. Could there have been an actual island that existed temporarily and was later submerged by rising sea levels, or perhaps an island that was hidden by natural forces like fog or storms, and then forgotten over time? Another theory suggests that Hy-Brasil might have been an island in the Celtic Sea, possibly located near the coast of Ireland or Scotland, that was lost to history due to natural disasters, erosion, or shifting tides. It's worth noting that, throughout history, islands have appeared and disappeared from maps due to natural shifts in geography, whether through the rising or falling of sea levels or the erosion of land masses over time. Some have even speculated that Hy-Brasil could have been an island that once existed but was gradually consumed by the sea, leaving only faint memories behind in the folklore of the ancient sailors. Then there's the more speculative and perhaps more fantastical theory that Hy-Brasil was not just a physical location, but a place of great spiritual or esoteric significance. Some researchers suggest that the island may have been a symbolic concept, a representation of a lost civilization or an enlightened society, hidden from the world by time and geography. This theory is supported by the repeated association of Hy-Brasil with mystical knowledge, sacred wisdom, and even connections to the ancient Druids, who were thought to possess profound, otherworldly knowledge. Could Hy-Brasil have been a place where such knowledge was kept, an island of sages and scholars, hidden from the eyes of the uninitiated? One of the more intriguing pieces of evidence supporting this idea is the persistent association of Hy-Brasil with the number 7. The island was said to appear every 7 years, and the number 7 has long been a symbol of mystical significance in many cultures, from ancient Egypt to medieval Europe. Some have suggested that Hy-Brasil, with its elusive and rare appearance, may have been a symbol of knowledge or enlightenment that could only be accessed by those who were spiritually prepared, those who could understand its deeper meaning. Could it be that Hy-Brasil was not merely a physical island, but rather a metaphor for a hidden truth, accessible only to the select few? Despite centuries of exploration, myth-making, and speculation, the true nature of Hy-Brasil remains as elusive as ever. Some have argued that the island's mystery is simply the result of ancient sailors' imaginations running wild, influenced by the foggy, treacherous waters of the Atlantic. Yet the fact that the island appeared on maps for so long, and that sailors reported seeing it with their own eyes, leaves open the possibility that something more than mere myth is at play. In the end, the mystery of Hy-Brasil persists. Was it a real island that has since disappeared, lost to the ravages of time and nature? Was it an illusion, a mirage caused by strange atmospheric conditions? Or was it something deeper, a symbol of something hidden, a knowledge or wisdom that lies just beyond our grasp? As we peer into the vastness of the ocean, we are reminded that not all mysteries are meant to be solved. Perhaps Hy-Brasil will remain forever lost, a testament to the uncharted territories of both the world and the human imagination. And in that uncertainty, the question remains: what else might still be hidden, waiting to be discovered in the mists of time? The year is 814 AD. The mighty halls of Aachen are filled with the echoes of hushed whispers. Charlemagne, the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, lies dying, his body frail and weak. He had ruled with strength and vision, uniting much of Western Europe under one banner, forging what many would call the Carolingian Renaissance. The Carolingian Empire, his legacy, stretched from the heart of modern-day France to parts of Italy, Germany, and beyond, an empire that had revived the Roman ideals of law, governance, and Christian rule. His death, when it came, would mark the end of an era, but it also marked the beginning of a mystery that has endured for centuries. How did Charlemagne, one of the greatest monarchs in history, meet his untimely death? The place where Charlemagne died, the palace at Aachen, is a solemn reminder of the man he had been, a warrior king who transformed his realm into a beacon of learning, faith, and power. But the death of such a towering figure has never been fully explained. Accounts vary, with some suggesting that he succumbed to old age after a long and prosperous reign. Others claim that he was stricken by an illness, possibly a fever or even a stroke. But as we look deeper, we find that the details surrounding his death remain ambiguous. And as is often the case with great figures of history, there are those who insist that Charlemagne's death was no simple, natural passing. One of the most commonly accepted explanations is that Charlemagne died of natural causes at the age of 72. It was a relatively advanced age for the time, and the emperor had been in poor health in the months leading up to his death. The historical record tells us that Charlemagne had become ill with a fever, and some say he fell into a state of weakness that led to his eventual death. His physicians were unable to help him, and he passed away in the year 814, leaving behind a legacy that would influence the course of European history for centuries. But the mysterious circumstances surrounding his death have fueled speculation. Some believe that Charlemagne's death was not simply the result of old age or illness. After all, this was a man who had commanded armies, conquered vast territories, and orchestrated complex political alliances. Could such a powerful and dynamic ruler have succumbed so quietly, with so little explanation? Was his death merely the end of a long reign, or was there something more to it? One theory, particularly popular among conspiracy theorists, suggests that Charlemagne may have been the victim of foul play. The emperor had made many enemies during his reign, both within his court and beyond. Could one of these enemies have conspired to end his life prematurely? Some have pointed to his relationships with certain figures within his court, particularly his sons and advisors. Charlemagne had several sons, some of whom were seen as rivals for the throne. Could one of them have played a role in hastening his death, perhaps by poisoning him or otherwise manipulating his illness? While no direct evidence has been found to support this theory, it remains a lingering question. The politics of the Carolingian Empire were fraught with tension, and it is not beyond the realm of possibility that Charlemagne's death could have been part of a larger political scheme. Yet another theory suggests that Charlemagne's death was not the result of human intervention, but rather a tragic twist of fate. Given the emperor's advancing age and his struggles with health, could it have simply been his time to pass on? Some modern historians suggest that Charlemagne's death was the inevitable result of a long and demanding life. His health had been in decline for months before he died, and it is entirely possible that his body, worn down by years of ruling an empire, simply gave out. The stress of constant warfare, political maneuvering, and the burdens of leadership might have taken their toll on his health. But even this explanation leaves us with questions. Charlemagne, after all, had been a remarkably resilient ruler. His reign had seen him overcome numerous challenges, from the Saxon Wars to the conflicts with the Lombards. He had built an empire that lasted for centuries, and had ensured its future with a careful blend of military conquest and religious diplomacy. Could such a man have been brought down so easily by natural causes? Perhaps the most intriguing theory of all is that Charlemagne's death was somehow linked to his broader vision for the future. Charlemagne was a devout Christian, and during his reign he worked closely with the Pope to solidify the bond between the Church and the monarchy. He had undergone a formal coronation by Pope Leo III in the year 800, when he was crowned Emperor of the Romans, establishing himself as the leader of a Christian empire. Charlemagne believed in the divine right of kings, and his sense of mission was deeply intertwined with his faith. It is not difficult to imagine that Charlemagne saw his role as part of a divine plan, a plan that might have continued even after his death. Could his passing have been the result of divine intervention, a way to fulfill his destiny? Some suggest that his death was not just a natural conclusion, but part of a grander scheme, one that was beyond human comprehension. In this view, Charlemagne's death might have been a divine act, ensuring that his reign ended at the moment it was meant to. What makes this theory even more fascinating is that Charlemagne's death occurred during a time of immense change. The empire he had built was already starting to show signs of strain, with his heirs not fully able to handle the vast territories he had conquered. His death set off a chain of events that would eventually lead to the fragmentation of the Carolingian Empire. Some argue that Charlemagne's death, occurring at this particular moment in history, was the necessary catalyst for the empire's evolution into something new, something different, but still influenced by the ideals Charlemagne had established. Even more intriguing is the legacy that Charlemagne left behind. His death did not end the Carolingian Empire, but it did lead to a division of power among his heirs. His sons, who had been rivals during his lifetime, were left to contend with the difficult task of preserving the empire he had built. In the years following his death, the empire would splinter, eventually leading to the formation of the Holy Roman Empire, a political entity that would remain a significant force in European history for centuries to come. Perhaps the true mystery of Charlemagne's death lies not in how he died, but in the consequences that followed. Was his passing the result of divine will? Was it part of a larger cosmic design? Or was it simply the end of an era, the natural conclusion to the life of a man who had accomplished much? Whatever the answer, the death of Charlemagne remains a mystery, a reminder that even the greatest of rulers are not immune to the forces of time and fate. As we reflect on Charlemagne's death, we are left with more questions than answers. Could there have been something hidden in the circumstances surrounding his final days? Was his death simply the natural end to a long reign? Or was there something more to it? A conspiracy, a divine plan, or a mystery beyond our comprehension? Perhaps we will never know the true nature of Charlemagne's death, but as the centuries pass, the questions remain, just as his legacy continues to shape the course of European history. And in the shadows of his passing, we are reminded that the greatest mysteries are often those that defy explanation, leaving us to wonder what might still be hidden, waiting to be discovered. The sun hangs low in the sky, casting a golden glow over the sprawling deserts of the American Southwest. The dry, cracked earth stretches endlessly in all directions, punctuated only by the occasional distant peak or jagged cliff. In the silence of the landscape, the wind whispers through the arid plains, carrying with it the faint scent of sagebrush and the promise of something ancient, something hidden. It's in places like these, remote, wild, and untamed, that legends have flourished, stories passed down through generations like fragile threads of myth. And among these stories, one stands out above all others: the legend of the 7 cities of gold. It is said that deep in the heart of North America, there exist cities, glorious, wealthy, and radiant with gold, waiting to be discovered. These cities, lost to time and swallowed by the wilderness, were once thought to hold unimaginable riches. The Seven Cities of Gold became a tantalizing mystery that lured explorers, conquistadors, and treasure hunters across treacherous lands, desperate to uncover the fortune that lay hidden. But what was the truth behind this legend? Were there truly 7 cities, gleaming with treasure, waiting to be found? Or was the legend a fabrication, a myth born of misunderstanding and misdirection? The earliest roots of the Seven Cities of Gold legend can be traced back to the Spanish explorations of the early 16th century. It was during this time that rumors began to circulate among the Spanish conquistadors of vast riches to the north, a land teeming with gold and treasures beyond imagining. The Spanish, ever hungry for wealth and power, were particularly drawn to tales of a city known as Cibola, said to be one of the 7 cities. The myth of these golden cities reached its peak with the story of the expedition led by Francisco Vázquez de Coronado, a Spanish nobleman who embarked on a legendary quest in 1540 to find the cities and claim their riches. Coronado's expedition was one of the most ambitious of its time. His army traversed the vast plains of modern-day Arizona, New Mexico, and even as far as Kansas in search of the fabled cities. What he found, however, was not the glittering treasures he had imagined, but rather the harsh realities of the American frontier. Instead of cities of gold, Coronado's men encountered small pueblo villages, where the inhabitants, Native American tribes such as the Zuni and Hopi, lived simple agrarian lives. The golden cities he sought were nowhere to be found, and Coronado's quest ultimately ended in failure. But the legend of the 7 Cities of Gold did not end with Coronado's return to Spain in disgrace. The story persisted, and the legend itself began to evolve. Over time, Cibola, once thought to be a single city, was now imagined as one of several cities, each filled with unimaginable wealth. Some said the cities were constructed by a lost civilization, perhaps even a civilization older than the Native American tribes living in the region. Others suggested that the cities were once the homes of a vanished empire, possibly of mythical origin. But regardless of the specifics, the allure of these lost cities, rich in gold and waiting to be rediscovered, became a driving force for further exploration. Yet, even as the Spanish explored, many began to question the very existence of the 7 Cities of Gold. Some historians argue that the origins of the myth are rooted in the misunderstandings and miscommunications between early Spanish explorers and the Native Americans they encountered. The Pueblo people, for example, spoke of a place known as Cibola, which was understood by the Spanish to be a city of great wealth. However, it is believed by some scholars that the word Cibola may have been misunderstood, and that it was not meant to describe a literal city made of gold, but rather a symbolic or metaphorical place. Was Cibola, then, nothing more than a mirage of the mind, a false hope spun from the tales of indigenous people who, perhaps unwittingly, encouraged the Spanish quest for riches? The idea that Cibola was a spiritual or symbolic place rather than a literal city is one of the more compelling explanations for the origin of the myth. The search for gold could then be seen as a projection of European desires, a quest for material wealth that distorted the deeper, more profound meanings embedded in indigenous stories. But the myth of the 7 Cities of Gold did not fade. It was given new life by another group of explorers who sought to conquer the unknown, the Jesuits. In the 17th century, Jesuit priests in New Spain, today's Mexico, began to spread rumors of cities in the northern territories that were said to be rich in gold. These rumors were undoubtedly influenced by earlier stories of the 7 Cities of Gold, but they also served a strategic purpose. The Jesuits, seeking to expand their influence in the Americas, used the legend as a way to secure royal backing and to justify further expeditions into the interior of the continent. By the 18th century, the legend had taken on a life of its own. It was no longer just a simple story of riches hidden somewhere in the vast deserts of the American Southwest. It had become a powerful symbol of exploration and conquest, a beacon that called out to those willing to risk everything for the promise of untold wealth. The 7 cities of gold were no longer confined to the realm of myth. They had become a potent force driving human ambition. As the centuries passed, countless expeditions set out to uncover the 7 cities, though none were ever successful. In 1829, an expedition led by the Mexican general and explorer Juan Bautista de Anza passed through the same territories that Coronado had explored nearly 3 centuries earlier. Yet even as the myths surrounding the 7 cities persisted, the cities themselves remained elusive. No treasure, no gleaming cities, no riches appeared to confirm the stories. The final nail in the coffin for the 7 cities of gold myth came in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, when scholars began to examine the legend more critically. Advances in archaeology, anthropology, and the study of Native American cultures cast doubt on the notion of an ancient civilization of gold-laden cities lying hidden in the desert. Instead, the cities of gold were increasingly seen as a metaphor for something more intangible, perhaps the wealth of knowledge, wisdom, or spiritual insight that these native cultures held. And yet, despite the absence of physical evidence, the legend of the 7 cities continues to capture the human imagination. What were these cities supposed to be? Were they, as some have suggested, simply exaggerated stories told by the indigenous people to deter the Spanish explorers? Or were they truly the remnants of an ancient and advanced civilization, now lost to time and the ravages of history? One theory suggests that the 7 cities were inspired by the real cities and civilizations of the Americas, perhaps the mighty civilizations of the Aztecs, the Maya, or even the mysterious ancestral Puebloans. The ancestral Puebloans, who once inhabited the American Southwest, built elaborate cliff dwellings and sprawling urban centers. Some have wondered whether these cities, now abandoned, could have been mistaken for the golden cities of legend. The ancestral Puebloans, who left behind their elaborate architecture and intricate pottery, were known for their remarkable achievements in agriculture, astronomy, and social organization. Could their thriving civilizations, now lost to history, have inspired the myth of the 7 cities? Another possibility is that the 7 cities of gold were not physical cities at all, but rather allegorical places. Perhaps the gold in the myth was symbolic, representing the spiritual riches and wisdom that explorers believed they could find in the New World. In this sense, the 7 cities could have been more about the search for enlightenment, for a deeper understanding of the world and its mysteries, than the accumulation of physical wealth. The enigma of the 7 cities of gold remains unsolved. Was there truth to the stories? Did these cities exist, hidden somewhere beneath the sands, waiting to be rediscovered? Or were they simply the product of myth and misunderstanding, a legend that took on a life of its own over the centuries? As we reflect on the mystery, we are left with more questions than answers. What does the legend of the 7 cities of gold tell us about the desires and motivations of those who sought them? And what, if anything, still remains hidden beneath the surface, waiting to be unearthed? Perhaps the true riches of the 7 cities lie not in gold or treasure, but in the ongoing exploration of the unknown. On the small, sun-soaked island of Barbados, there is a place where the past refuses to stay buried. Deep within the island's tropical heart lies the eerie, centuries-old Christ Church Cemetery, a serene yet unsettling final resting place for many who came before. Among its weathered tombstones and crumbling monuments, something strange has occurred, and it has left an indelible mark on the local folklore. This is the mystery of the moving coffins of Barbados, a tale so strange and captivating that it has puzzled both historians and amateur sleuths for generations. At first glance, Christ Church Cemetery seems like any other resting place. Quiet, peaceful, surrounded by the lush, vibrant greenery that defines the island. The graves are adorned with symbols of reverence and remembrance, and the air is thick with the scents of blooming tropical flowers. But beneath this veneer of tranquility, there is an underlying unease that has persisted for over 2 centuries. The mystery, first whispered among locals and later picked up by curious travelers, revolves around a series of coffins that appear to move on their own, shifting, tilting, or even being completely dislodged from their graves. The most famous of these coffins belongs to one of the earliest members of the decomposed family, whose burial site became the focal point of the mystery. Legend tells that, over time, the coffins of this family, whose members died under questionable circumstances, began to shift within their graves. In the early 19th century, local residents began noticing the disquieting phenomenon. Coffins, which had once been firmly interred in the earth, appeared to have moved from their original positions. Some were found several feet from where they were initially placed, while others were completely overturned. At first, the community dismissed these movements as natural shifts in the soil, perhaps due to the island's humid climate or the occasional tremor from a distant earthquake. Yet, as more coffins were found to be in strange new positions, a growing sense of dread began to take hold. The phenomenon was not just isolated to one grave or one family. Over the years, more coffins, some ancient, others much newer, appeared to defy the natural laws of the grave. Some were found lying sideways, others were scattered across the cemetery, and in some cases, entire family plots seemed to have been disturbed. So what was causing these unusual and disturbing occurrences? Was it a natural phenomenon, or was something more mysterious at work? The mainstream explanations, though plausible, have failed to fully account for the eerie precision with which the coffins shifted, always appearing to move in a deliberate and controlled manner, almost as if they were being influenced by some unseen force. One possibility put forward by skeptics is that the shifting coffins were simply the result of the unique environmental conditions of the region. Barbados, like many islands in the Caribbean, is subject to humid conditions, which can cause the ground to shift and the wood of coffins to warp or rot over time. As coffins deteriorate, it's possible that they could shift position, either due to the collapsing of the soil around them or from the pressure of nearby vegetation. But the sheer number of coffins involved and the extent to which they moved makes this explanation seem inadequate to many. The fact that the coffins seemed to rearrange themselves so systematically, some even appearing to be carefully rotated or tilted, challenges the idea that it was merely a natural process at play. Perhaps the most intriguing and unsettling theory, however, is one that suggests the coffins were not moving on their own at all, but that they were being moved by human hands. According to some, the disturbances in the graves were the result of a series of rituals or deliberate actions by members of the local community, or perhaps even outsiders who were drawn to the cemetery for reasons that remain unclear. The fact that many of the coffins belonged to families with known connections to the island's early plantation economy, where disease, death, and misfortune were frequent companions, adds weight to the suggestion that the moves could have had a supernatural or spiritual motive. What if these strange movements were part of some long-forgotten cultural or spiritual practice, perhaps a belief system that viewed death and the afterlife in a different light? In certain African and indigenous Caribbean traditions, there are rituals associated with the dead that involve the care and handling of the deceased's remains, sometimes even reopening graves to ensure the spirits of the dead are properly appeased. Could the moving coffins of Barbados be tied to these ancient, possibly forbidden customs? Theories such as these delve into the realm of the supernatural, suggesting that the coffin's movement might have been influenced by vengeful spirits, or perhaps even the will of the deceased themselves. These theories often lean on the concept of spiritual unrest, a belief that certain souls, trapped in the limbo of death, might exert their influence on the physical world in an effort to free themselves. This could explain the unsettling, seemingly deliberate nature of the movements, as if the coffins were trying to escape their confines or alter their positions for reasons unknown. Of course, the possibility that the movements were caused by human intervention, whether through ritual or mischief, remains just as plausible. There have been suggestions that grave robbers, seeking to disturb the dead for whatever purpose, may have moved the coffins to create confusion or disguise their actions. Some have even suggested that the moving coffins might have been part of an elaborate hoax or an attempt to draw attention to the cemetery, a place already steeped in mystery and legend. Yet the mystery of the moving coffins is not confined to Barbados. Stories of similar phenomena have surfaced in other parts of the world, suggesting that this is not just an isolated case. The most notable of these parallels can be found in the old, abandoned cemeteries of Europe, particularly those in areas where ancient cultures once practiced burial rites linked to the supernatural. Ireland is home to several graveyards where the dead are said to shift their resting places, often with similar eerie precision as the moving coffins of Barbados. These stories, while no less mystifying, remain just as unsolved as their Caribbean counterpart. In the Caribbean itself, a number of other graves across the region have also been reported to have moved or shifted, some as recently as the 20th century. In many cases, these occurrences were linked to local folklore and oral traditions, where stories of restless spirits, voodoo rituals, and strange curses abound. Could there be a deeper cultural thread linking these occurrences, suggesting that the practices surrounding death and the afterlife are far more intricate than we currently understand? Yet, for all the speculation and theories, there remains no definitive answer to the question of why the coffins of Christ Church Cemetery shift. And as the years pass, the local mystery only deepens. Is it possible that the spirits of the dead are, in some way, still active, still attempting to communicate with the living in the most cryptic way imaginable? Or is it that the land itself, this island with its rich and turbulent history, harbors some strange energy that affects the physical world in ways we are only beginning to comprehend? What remains most troubling is not that the coffins moved, but rather that they moved in such a manner that leaves the world with more questions than answers. Was it human intervention, nature's forces, or something far beyond the realm of physical science that caused the graves to shift and the coffins to stir? And as we reflect on this mystery, it becomes increasingly clear. There may be far more beneath the surface of the earth and the veil of the unknown than we are prepared to understand. Could the dead truly have a hand in moving their final resting places, or is there some force at work that defies the logic we cling to? The mystery of the moving coffins of Barbados continues to beguile, reminding us that there are still enigmas in the world that refuse to yield their secrets. Amid the serene beauty of the Outer Banks of North Carolina, a curious silence hangs over a stretch of land where the past seems to fade into the wind-swept dunes. The lush green of the island meets the boundless blue of the Atlantic Ocean, its endless horizon both alluring and foreboding. This is the site of one of the most enduring mysteries in American history, the lost colony of Roanoke. Over 400 years ago, a group of English settlers vanished from this very spot, leaving behind little more than a single word carved into a tree: Croatoan. What happened to them? Was it an act of nature, an enemy attack, or something far more mysterious that led to their disappearance? Theories abound, but the truth remains as elusive as the island itself. In 1587, a group of over 100 settlers, led by John White, landed on Roanoke Island with the intention of establishing a permanent colony. Their mission was part of a broader effort by Queen Elizabeth I to establish a foothold in the New World, a venture that would be vital to England's quest for wealth and influence. White, an artist and seasoned explorer, left the colony to return to England for supplies, leaving behind his daughter, Eleanor, and his granddaughter, Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the New World. However, When White returned 3 years later, he found the settlement abandoned, with no trace of the inhabitants, no sign of struggle, and no clear explanation as to where they had gone. The only clue left behind was the word Croatoan, etched into a tree near the abandoned settlement, a name that referred to a nearby island and its native people, the Croatan. It was a puzzling message. Why would the settlers have carved it into a tree? Was it a message of hope, a sign that they had moved to a safer location, or was it something else entirely? Despite searching the surrounding areas, no evidence was found that would explain what had happened. The colony had vanished without a trace. The mystery of Roanoke has lingered for centuries, becoming the subject of numerous investigations, books, documentaries, and theories. Scholars, historians, and amateur sleuths alike have speculated about the fate of the settlers, but despite their efforts, the question remains: where did they go? Did they assimilate with local tribes, succumb to disease, or were they victims of violence? Could they have been taken by force, or did they simply abandon their colony, perhaps in search of a more hospitable land? Theories abound, yet all we have are fragments, glimpses of the past that raise more questions than they answer. One of the most commonly accepted theories is that the settlers were absorbed by the local Croatan tribe. This theory is supported by the carving of the word Croatoan and the fact that the Croatan people were known to have lived nearby. Some even suggest that the settlers may have formed an alliance with the tribe, either for survival or for mutual benefit. If this theory is correct, it could explain why no signs of violence were found at the settlement. Perhaps the settlers had simply integrated into the local community, blending their European customs with the Native American ways of life. Evidence for this theory is scant, however, and it relies heavily on speculation. Were the settlers truly so desperate that they would have abandoned their European roots and joined a community of Native Americans? Or was there something more to the story that we still don't understand? Another theory posits that the settlers were victims of violence, either at the hands of hostile Native American tribes or perhaps even by Spanish forces. Tensions between the English and the Spanish were high during this period, and Spain had a vested interest in preventing English colonization in the Americas. Could it be that the settlers were attacked and massacred, their remains hidden by the perpetrators? No signs of such violence were ever found at Roanoke, but could it have been deliberately covered up? Or could the evidence have simply eroded over time, lost to the sands of history? Theories of natural disaster also come into play. Some suggest that the settlers may have perished due to disease, famine, or exposure to the harsh conditions of the New World. The early years of colonization were fraught with hardship, and diseases like dysentery, typhoid fever, and malaria were rampant. The settlers may have been unable to secure enough food or supplies, or perhaps they fell ill and were unable to recover. While disease certainly played a role in the demise of many early colonies, there is little evidence to suggest that it wiped out the entire population of Roanoke. Others have speculated that the settlers may have simply abandoned the colony, either because of disillusionment with their prospects or due to internal conflict. The colony may have struggled to establish a sustainable settlement, and without the guidance of their leader, John White, who had gone to England for supplies, the settlers could have been left to fend for themselves. In this scenario, they may have chosen to leave, either to return to England or to seek a more fertile region in which to settle. This theory, however, is undermined by the fact that the settlers left behind no trace of their departure. Surely, if they had simply packed up and left, there would have been some sign of their journey, some hint of where they went. More speculative theories suggest that the settlers may have been victims of an otherworldly or supernatural event. Over the centuries, stories have circulated of strange occurrences surrounding the Roanoke colony, of eerie lights in the sky, inexplicable sounds in the night, and strange visions seen by those who searched the island. Could the settlers have encountered something beyond human comprehension, something that led to their mysterious disappearance? While such theories are far more speculative, they persist in the popular imagination, often fueled by a desire to explain what seems like an inexplicable event. The legend of the Roanoke colony is far from the only disappearance of its kind. In fact, it is part of a broader historical pattern of lost colonies and missing explorers. From the lost expeditions of the Vikings to the mysterious fates of early Spanish and French settlements, history is rife with instances of entire groups of people vanishing without a trace. In many of these cases, the disappearance of the people was never fully explained, and the theories surrounding their fates continue to evolve. For instance, the Norse settlement at Vinland, believed to be located somewhere along the eastern coast of North America, was abandoned around the year 1000. Although evidence suggests that the Norse colonists interacted with local Native American tribes, there is little to explain why the settlement was ultimately abandoned. Was it due to a shortage of resources, an attack by hostile tribes, or perhaps an internal collapse? Similarly, the Spanish expeditions to the Americas, such as those led by Hernando de Soto, often reported mysterious disappearances or settlements that simply vanished. In some cases, these expeditions were caught in the grip of disease, starvation, or war, but the lack of clear answers only fuels speculation. The lost colony of Roanoke shares striking parallels with these earlier disappearances, suggesting that the fate of its settlers may not be as unique as we think. Across time, the story of entire groups of people vanishing, without explanation, without a clear sign of violence or catastrophe, has become a recurring theme in history. And while we may never uncover the full truth behind the fate of the Roanoke colony, the persistence of the mystery suggests that there may be a deeper, more elusive answer waiting to be discovered. Perhaps, as with so many mysteries in history, the key to understanding the disappearance of the Roanoke settlers lies not in a single explanation, but in the convergence of multiple factors: environmental, cultural, and perhaps even psychological. Could the settlers have been victims of circumstance, or did something more profound take place? What if the answers to the Roanoke mystery are not hidden in the landscape, but in the way we approach the past itself, through layers of myth, speculation, and the search for meaning in an otherwise unknowable world? As we continue to probe the mystery of the Roanoke colony, we are left with a multitude of questions. Could the settlers have left behind more clues than we realize? Did they truly disappear into the landscape? Or did they find a new way to survive in a world that, to them, was full of unknown dangers? The answers remain as elusive as the winds that blow across the island, whispering a forgotten tale that still beckons for discovery. As the sun rises over the lush, rolling hills of central Java, Indonesia, the towering silhouette of Borobudur emerges from the mist like a colossal stone guardian, ancient and enigmatic. This immense Buddhist temple, built in the 9th century, stands as one of the most remarkable feats of architecture in the world. The sheer scale of its construction, the intricate carvings, and the spiritual significance of its design make it a treasure trove of mystery. Yet, there is something even more elusive about Borobudur, a hidden layer of symbolism woven into its very structure. Despite being studied by archaeologists, historians, and scholars for centuries, the true intent behind its construction, the depth of its symbolism, and the purpose of certain design elements continue to provoke questions. What was the true meaning behind the temple's creation? Was it simply a place of worship? Or was there a deeper, more mystical significance embedded within its stones? Borobudur, as it stands today, is a monumental pyramid-shaped structure consisting of 9 stacked platforms, crowned with a massive stupa at the top. It measures approximately 35 meters in height and covers an area of over 2,500 square meters. The temple is intricately adorned with over 2,600 relief panels and 504 statues of Buddha, each meticulously carved from volcanic stone. From afar, The structure exudes a sense of grandeur and harmony, as if it were a vessel designed to transport those who approach it from the earthly realm to the divine. At first glance, Borobudur appears to be a simple Buddhist monument, built as a place of meditation and devotion. However, as one delves deeper into its design, it becomes clear that there is much more to this temple than meets the eye. The very layout of Borobudur appears to be steeped in profound symbolic meaning, drawing not just from Buddhist teachings, but also from ancient cosmic principles. The temple's structure is not merely a representation of physical space, but rather an intricate map of the Buddhist cosmos, a journey from the earthly to the divine. The lower levels of Borobudur, for example, are intricately carved with scenes that depict the Lalibela, the story of the Buddha's life. These panels recount his birth, enlightenment, and teachings, presenting an allegorical journey through the stages of human existence. As the observer moves up through the levels, the artwork transitions from earthly struggles to more transcendent themes. The lower platforms are dark and enclosed, representing the suffering and confusion of life in the material world, while the upper levels become progressively lighter, symbolizing the ascent toward spiritual enlightenment. However, it is not just the thematic progression of the reliefs that raises questions, but the very geometry of Borobudur. The temple is aligned with precise astronomical and cosmological principles. Some scholars have pointed out that the layout of the temple mirrors the Buddhist concept of the universe, with each level corresponding to a different state of being. The lower levels correspond to the Kamadhatu, the world of desire, where suffering and attachment dominate. As one ascends, the temple represents the Rupadhatu, the world of form, and finally, the Arupadhatu, the world of formlessness, which represents the ultimate goal of nirvana. This structure, when viewed as a whole, mimics the journey of the soul, climbing from the physical world to the realm of the divine. But what truly sets Borobudur apart from other religious structures is the presence of the stupa at its summit. This massive, bell-shaped structure stands at the very top of the temple, and inside it are 72 small stupas, each containing a statue of the Buddha. The central stupa, much larger than the others, remains empty. It is the emptiness at the heart of Borobudur's structure that has sparked intense speculation and intrigue. Why is the central stupa devoid of a statue? Was it meant to be an empty space for contemplation, symbolizing the void of enlightenment? Or is there a deeper, perhaps even secret meaning to its emptiness, something hidden beneath layers of time and history? Many theories have been proposed over the years, ranging from the scientific to the mystical. Some researchers suggest that the emptiness of the central stupa represents the Buddhist principle of sunyata, or the void, a concept central to Mahayana Buddhism. According to this interpretation, the emptiness of the stupa is symbolic of the ultimate realization that all things are empty of inherent existence, and that true enlightenment comes from transcending the material world. Others believe that the empty stupa was a deliberate choice, meant to represent the idea that the Buddha, in his final form, is beyond physical representation and can only be understood through spiritual realization. This would align with certain Mahayana teachings, which emphasize the notion of Buddha's transcendent nature. But some theories go even further, hinting at a far more esoteric and mysterious purpose behind the central stupa. Ancient astronaut theorists have suggested that Borobudur's design might have had a connection to celestial alignments, suggesting that the temple was constructed not just to represent the Buddhist cosmos, but to align with specific star constellations. Could Borobudur have served as an astronomical observatory, a tool for ancient skywatchers to track the movements of the stars and planets? The precision with which the temple is aligned with the cardinal directions, especially the direction of the sunrise, has led some to speculate that Borobudur might have been used in ancient rituals to mark celestial events such as solstices and equinoxes. Could the empty stupa, then, have been meant to mark a particular point in the heavens? Perhaps a place where the divine could be accessed during a specific celestial event? While these theories may seem speculative, they are not entirely unfounded. The ancient Javanese were known for their intricate understanding of the cosmos, and there are many other religious structures throughout Southeast Asia that exhibit similar astronomical alignments. But if Borobudur were truly meant as a tool for understanding the stars and the universe, why has this purpose remained so elusive? Did the ancient builders of Borobudur leave us with a cosmic puzzle, one that we are only now beginning to decode? The symbolism of Borobudur's design does not stop with its alignment and astronomical features. Hidden within the structure are numerous occult and mystical symbols that may point to ancient wisdom, long-forgotten knowledge, or even lost technologies. One of the most intriguing aspects of Borobudur is its use of geometric patterns, specifically the mandala. The mandala, a spiritual symbol of the universe, appears prominently in Borobudur's design. The temple's 9 stacked platforms are arranged in a circular pattern, which, when viewed from above, forms a large mandala that mirrors the cosmic order. This circular layout is not just symbolic of the universe, but it also suggests a hidden structure, an underlying order that ties the physical world to the metaphysical. In addition, the relief panels themselves are filled with intricate depictions of mythical creatures, celestial beings, and divine figures, many of which are not immediately recognizable as part of the traditional Buddhist pantheon. These figures, some of which resemble depictions of gods and deities from other ancient cultures, raise the question of whether Borobudur was a syncretic structure, a blending of different spiritual and cosmic traditions. Could the temple have served as a convergence point, not only for Buddhist philosophy, but also for the ancient wisdom of other cultures that once flourished in the region? As researchers continue to study Borobudur, new findings emerge that suggest the temple may contain even more layers of symbolism than previously thought. There are still areas of the temple that have yet to be fully explored, and there may be hidden chambers or reliefs yet to be discovered. Could there be more secrets buried within its walls? Secrets that could illuminate the true purpose of Borobudur and its connection to the cosmos, the divine, and humanity's deepest spiritual questions? As we reflect on the enigmatic construction of Borobudur, we are left with more questions than answers. Was the temple built solely as a place of worship, or was it designed to embody a deeper, more profound understanding of the universe? What was the true meaning behind its complex symbolism, and why has it remained so elusive for centuries? And perhaps most tantalizing of all, what hidden wisdom might still lie within the temple, waiting to be uncovered? As the sun sets over the island of Java, casting long shadows over the ancient stone, one cannot help but wonder what secrets Borobudur continues to guard, and whether its mysteries will ever truly be revealed.